Hello, everybody. Good morning. Hi. Hello. Welcome back to the channel. We are here earlier than I have been coming on here lately. It is 9:34 a.m. Monday, August 17th, 2026. It's going to be a long day for me. Okay. I already started off today very early. I had my Sanskrit class at 6. Then I had a Vedanta class from like 7 to 8. And then now I have this. I had to talk about this today because I had originally scheduled to talk about the Keefe D Tupac trial today, which I still will be doing. So, yeah, so I wanted to come on here today to make sure that I did keep up to speed, up to date on the bricks and the minifigs and that whole saga. Well, guess what? As you can see from the title and the thumbnail, Brandon Best and Joshua Johnson have been sued. Yes, they have. And, the poetic irony, the poetic justice, if you will, is that really it was their own franchisee who's going to be the one doing it. Now, she's obviously not their franchisee anymore. We're talking about Crystal Gorman, Crystal Law Gorman, and also her husband, Ben Gorman, who owned the Salem Kaiser store. So this is not necessarily speaking, is it a new lawsuit? But it is a new lawsuit. You know what I mean? So what I mean by that, if you're completely lost, is Crystal Law Gorman and Ben Gorman, they already sued. They already sued BAM Franchising. But now they have amended that complaint. The complaint is amended. And you might have seen some other YouTubers talking about it. I think that Echo Base Network might have talked about it. Yeah. Shout out to Coach, because he's been he's been back at school. So he made like a 3 or 4 minute video on his channel. I think Barbecue Counselor also made a video. And so I thought what we could do today would be to go through this lawsuit filing. I do have, let me pull it up. I do have a version of this lawsuit that is the red line comparison version. So, different, I guess, regions and different, what's the word I'm looking for? Like professions or whatever do call this type of document different things. I've been taught to call it a red line, but I've heard people call it a black line. Track changes version, whatever you want to call it. But what we're going to be looking at is this version that is like the comparison version from the first complaint, the original complaint. This is what we're going to be reading. It's called the first amended complaint. And this is where Josh and Brandon are added. Now, not only are Joshua Johnson and Brandon Best added as defendants in this particular case, or in this particular filing, but also Ammon McNeff and his brother, Matt McNeff, are also added as defendants in this case. So yeah, I did a live stream with Sheldon last night. It was really fun. It wasn't about the bricks and the minifigs per se. It was actually about a different story. The Provo Canyon School, which that Provo Canyon School has been on my radar for a long time. So, what a crossover. Y'all might have noticed I got a new chair. I did. Actually, it was free. Shout out to eWin. I got to do like a dedicated ad for it or whatever, but I love this chair. I was actually not I needed a new chair, so I was like, yeah, send me the chair. I'll do a review on it, but I'm going to get an honest review. And so they sent me this chair, and I did my first stream in it last night, and I feel like I'm in a lazy boy, girl. This thing is, my chair I had before was a very nice chair. It was a steel case. What was the name of it? Steel case. I don't remember the name of it, but I bought it used. When I bought it, it was like 4 or 5 years old, but those chairs have like a 10-year warranty on them. And I have like sat a hole in that thing. I mean, it is just beat up, worn down, worn out, but it's a very expensive chair. So I don't know what to do. So anyway, I got this new chair. I guess it got damaged in shipping. I hope that comes out, but I was thinking about bedazzling. It. What do y'all think? Leap? Was it a Leap chair? I don't think it was a Leap. Let me see. But I got it used when I got it. It was like 4 years old. No, not Leap. It was more like, oh, maybe it was Herman Miller. Hold on. No, that's Tempur-Pedic. Oh, maybe it was a Leap. Hold on. I would recommend that chair. It is very nice. But girl, that thing is so expensive. No, it wasn't a Leap. Maybe a Gesture. It was this one. Whoo, girl, they $2,000 now. Okay, well, I'm not gonna be getting one of those. Anyway, I have this one. It's cool. I gotta do like a little ad for it or whatever at some point, but this part's not sponsored. I just really like the chair, but I'll be doing my sponsored ad later. Yeah, I was thinking about bedazzling it. Anyway, I couldn't believe you brought it up and then it was their next case. Actually, I've been talking about Provocation since 2022. Maybe 2023, but I think it was 2022. Yeah, I was thinking about matching it to the mic and my headphones. Oh yeah, true. It might damage my hair. That is true. That is true. I would have to cover it up with something. Okay. So the coolest part of this chair to me so far is this thing. It's a headrest, but it's like magnet. Love that. One thing I will say is this chair is actually way too big for me. Like ergonomically, I need a much smaller chair. This is like the XL, and I'm not even like medium sized. I'm like short. Pre-order for the shirts is closed. Nope. Y'all had your warnings. Y'all had your warnings. Okay, so here is speaking of shirts, I know y'all are going to be trying to read this. Okay, so it says, I challenge the darkness. If nothing else, at least around myself, I will not let it settle. Around myself, around myself, I will establish light. Okay, that's from Shahid Jaswant Singh. Kalra, he was a martyr. He was martyred in India. We can read a little bit more about his story later. Shout out to him. But every time I like think about that saying, I get emotional. That's the one where it's like, it was the first day that there was ever going to be a sunset. It's a parable or whatever. It's not real, but it's like the first day that they were ever gonna, see the sunset. And then people were scared. They're like, what are we gonna do? It's gonna be dark. We don't know what to do without looking at the sun, and we need the sun. And the guy is like the one little villager in this teeny tiny little poor village is like, well, you know what? I'm going to light my little diva. I'm gonna light my little light. I get emotional talking about it. I don't know why. It's like I do. But when I saw this shirt, I was like, oh, I need it because I love it. On the back, there's like a picture of him. Anyway, he was like really, really cool. He ended up finding out that like the Indian government, like specifically, I think the Punjab government was like killing people extrajudicially, and then they were like hiding the bodies so the families didn't know. And it was like 100,000 or more people. And this guy was like tracking them down and making sure, that people were made aware in their families and stuff. And he ended up getting picked up himself, and no one ever saw him again. So you can imagine what might have happened. He passed away in the 90s. So this wasn't even that long ago. But anyway, I just like that saying a lot. So I linked the shirt down below. I don't get any money from it or anything like that. But y'all are always like trying to say like, what's on your shirt or whatever. So we can look at that later if y'all want to see the website or whatever. It's a really cool Punjabi streetwear brand called Risen Retro, based in Canada, but it's like Punjabi stuff. Yes, rest in peace to Hayden Panettiere. Very sad. She just now was doing a book tour for her book, and in the book she was exposing, the abuses that she faced in Hollywood and stuff like that. It was very sad. She was in what was it, not The Blind Side, Friday Night Lights, or one of those type of movies. I think it was Friday Night Lights. She was like the little Remember the Titans. She was in one of those football movies, and she was like a little girl. And then she was in some other stuff, and she was just now released her book and was talking about, justice and stuff like that. And, my age, well, she's 36. I'll be 36 next month. So yeah, that's sad. Anyway. Okay. So I needed to come on here early today because I got to cover the Tupac trial later. So if y'all are interested in that, it's opening statement. So I'm going to leave. She was in Hero too. I'm going to leave here around before 12:30 or by 12:30. And then I'm going to go back live again, and we are going to be talking about and watching live the opening statements for the Tupac Shakur, speaking of martyrs, the Tupac trial. They have Keefe D, Dwayne Keith Davis on trial. He's one of the only people still alive who even saw what happened that night. He wrote a book. Stupid. What an idiot. He put out a book, like basically like saying all kind of stuff about the murder. And he thought that he had immunity for that. And he definitely didn't. You don't have immunity for shit you write in a book. So now he's on trial. So yeah, we'll be talking about that later. But without further ado, let's get into this first amended complaint. Now, as you'll see, I have gone through and done my little annotations to some extent as well. So like this, for example, you know, this red box and things. So you'll see some annotations by me. So I would say don't actually read this right here. This isn't a good indicator of what actually is the truth at this point. But you'll see stuff like this. And so what it is going to mean is this is what the original complaint used to say in this red line, the red line. Literally, that's why that's called red line, because it shows what was removed. But in the blue, this is what's been added for this version of the complaint. So this is the first amended version of the complaint. I believe that they could amend the complaint even more as they go through discovery. Okay, so without further ado, this is the red line comparison version. We're going to be, because I like to see what was changed. Really importantly here, Josh Johnson, Brandon, look, it says it right here. We'll just start here. Look, amended plaintiffs, Banff Salem 1, that's the name of the LLC that Crystal and her husband Benjamin owned, complain as follows against defendant. Now, it was just defendant BAM Franchising, right? BAM Franchising Inc. But now it has been updated. All right. Baker Bricks LLC, Salem Baker Bricks Inc. Now, wait, Inc.? Hold on. That's Josh and Brandon, Joshua Johnson and Brandon Best's business. I'm looking up if I have those documents. I thought it was an LLC. No, it is. It's a corporation. Wow. Okay. All right. Interesting. I was wrong on that one. Okay. Believe it or not, I'm wrong on stuff sometimes, y'all. All right. So the Gormans, the Crystal Law and Benjamin Gorman have updated their complaint. All right. So Baker Bricks and Salem Baker Bricks have now been added. This is Josh Johnson and Brandon Best's companies. Now, it's unclear exactly what the business relationship is between Baker Bricks LLC and Salem Baker Bricks LLC. We'll get more into that as we get through this. They do kind of explain that here. It's like, okay, is the Salem Baker Bricks actually just Baker Bricks doing business in Oregon, like the doing business as name? Or is it a totally separate entity? We really don't know. And that is something that probably only Josh and Brandon and like, you know, the Department of State or whatever, the Department, Secretary of State, the corporations division would know. But it isn't only that Josh Johnson and Brandon Best and their companies got added. It's also Matthew McNeff individually and Ammon McNeff individually. But Joshua Johnson, you know, I keep kind of almost like audibly hearing him in my mind. Then sue me. Then sue. If it's illegal, then sue. If it's illegal, then sue. Woo-hoo-hoo. Well, they did. They sued. They've done sued. Okay. All right. So let's read. It's 44 pages. Hopefully we can get through this in the time before I need to switch over to the Tupac trial. Because I also have some other updates I want to go over with y'all if we have time to get to them today. It says this action arises. Now, this all was in the original complaint. All this stuff on the first page, we've already heard it before, but I'm going to just read it again because who remembers that, girl? I mean, there's so much that happens every day. It says this action arises from the wrongful termination of a Bricks and Minifigs franchise in Salem, Oregon, and the franchisor's subsequent seizure of the franchisee's business assets and defamation of the franchise owners. Okay, so the wrongful termination, seizure, and defamation. Okay, so wrongfully terminating her franchise, stealing her or taking, they're calling it seizure, taking her stuff, and then defaming her. Plaintiffs Crystal Law and Ben Gorman, that's her husband, they're both plaintiffs. They're both suing. Through their company, Banff Salem One operated the Salem Bricks and Minifigs under a franchise agreement with BAM Franchising. In November 2024, Bricks and Minifigs, without valid cause, abruptly terminated the franchise, changed the locks, and took control of the store and its inventory. Changed the locks. The purported defaults Bricks and Minifigs used, so purported defaults, kind of implying they weren't really defaults, which is what BAM is claiming. Hold on, I gotta adjust my lumbar pillow. Okay. The purported defaults that Bricks and Minifigs used as a pretext were problems of Bricks and Minifigs' own making. And those problems had been cured or waived. Bricks and Minifigs failed to transfer the store's bank account and property lease to the plaintiffs as required. This directly caused the payment issues that were later cited as grounds for termination. So Bricks and Minifigs failed to transfer the store's bank account and the lease. And then later we're like, well, we have the lease in our name anyway, so we're going to keep it. Bricks and Minifigs then refused to compensate plaintiffs for the confiscated assets, effectively stealing the merchandise and equipment worth over $100,000. Later, Bricks and Minifigs agents falsely told third parties that Crystal Law and Ben Gorman had taken certain valuable inventory. This was a lie that damaged plaintiffs' reputations. Bricks and Minifigs' conduct demonstrates willful bad faith and malice. During the takeover, BAM's representatives threatened to call the police if plaintiffs did not comply. And BAM's director of operations, that would be Kai McAllister, confronted on the recorded call with the coercive nature of these demands. He conceded, quote, "It sounds like a threat," Kai McAllister said. The quote continues, "And I can acknowledge you feeling that, because in a way, it is a threat." Such conduct justifies an award of punitive damages. Bricks and Minifigs' own director of operations acknowledged on a recorded call that plaintiffs had successfully operated the franchise. He said, quote, you guys did the work, kept the store open. You guys should pat yourself on the back for that." Okay, so pretty much all of that we kind of already saw. There was a little bit of the detail changes in number 6. You can kind of see what was crossed out. And this blue right here is what was put in. But pretty much same thing, right? Like there was a sinister call. Okay. Now, all of the next 2 paragraphs entirely are brand new. These are brand new from Crystal Law, Ben Gorman, first amended complaint. This is the new amended complaint. And this is brand new. We haven't seen this before, what we're about to read. Paragraph 7 says, the advance formation of the replacement entity more than 6 months before termination. Okay, so that's one thing. Number 2, Brandon Best securing and inventorying of the store on the very night of the seizure. That was the second one. The third one is, and the registration of the Oregon operating vehicle the very next day reflect deliberation and planning rather than impulse. Such calculated, premeditated conduct directed at recapturing and reselling Crystal and Ben's business is the hallmark of conduct warranting an award of punitive damages. Okay, so they're saying, look, these activities, Your Honor, don't let Brandon Best and Josh Johnson and them come around later and say, oh no, we just did this at the last minute. She called us and then we had to hurry up and snap to action. She said, no, not that. Absolutely not. In fact and indeed, they were planning this. This is a scheme. They wanted to recapture and resell my business. This is the hallmark of punitive damages, and the reason I think that is, number one, they created this entity that they would ultimately use to take over my business over 6 months before I was terminated as a franchisee. Number two, more pre-planning and thinking. Brandon Best showed up and inventoried the whole store the very night it was seized. The third thing is the operating vehicle for Oregon, which would be the Salem Baker Bricks. It was started the very next day after the store was taken over. This is calculated premeditated conduct, according to Crystal Law Gorman. Then we go on to paragraph 8. This is the First Amendment complaint, right? So the First Amendment complaint adds as defendants the persons and entities through whom BAM accomplished and profited from the seizure of Crystal and Ben's store. More than 6 months before Bricks and Minifigs terminated the franchise, defendants Brandon Best and Joshua Johnson organized Baker Bricks LLC. On the night of the seizure, Brandon Best, acting as the contracted inventory inspector for Bricks and Minifigs, secured Chris's store and inventoried the contents. The very next day, the Oregon operating vehicle Salem Baker Bricks was registered, and Bricks and Minifigs ultimately transferred the business and assets to Baker Bricks. Defendants Matthew and Ammon McNeff, these are BAM's owners and officers, are named for their own conduct. Okay, so this is like, no, we're piercing the corporate veil. We're piercing the corporate veil, goofy cart number 3 and 4. Okay. Why? Because y'all acted in your own conduct. It wasn't just your business, it was you. For example, they say on information and belief, they directed and participated in the seizure and resale scheme. Now, this is the first time in the filing, it's page 3, where I see the word scheme. And usually when they're talking scheme, you're either going to be seeing RICO type charges or allegations or fraud. Okay. Scheme sometimes can be used as a conspiracy, but usually if it's conspiracy, it'll just say in the conspiracy. This says scheme. Okay. So Ammon and Matt are being sued for their participation in this scheme. Bricks and Minifigs has admitted the formation, the inventory at repossession, the next day Oregon registration, and the transfer in its own verified pleading filed in a related action. So don't let them, Your Honor, try to say they didn't say this, because they sure did. And they said it under penalty of perjury too. All right, so number 9 is a few things that are new, but mostly the same as the old. So it's like the plaintiffs assert the following claims. There's 15, which is a lot. 15 is a lot of claims. Number 1, fraud in the inducement, which we will get into a little bit more what that means in a little while. So fraud, negligent misrepresentation, breach of contract, breach of the implied covenant of good faith and fair dealing, conversion, which is like stealing, aiding and abetting conversion. Number 7 would be violation of Article 9 of the Utah Uniform Commercial Code. Number 8 would be tortious interference with economic relations. That's so funny, because that is what they, the Bricks and the Minifigs people, tried to get Ben arrested for originally, but the criminal version of it. So like commercial interference with a contract, or commercial interference with business relations, or something like that. Now they're getting sued for that by Chris Law Gorman, but they already were. See, this is one of the ones that already existed, the tortious interference one. Number 9, defamation. Number 10, injurious falsehood. Number 11, civil conspiracy. Number 12, violation of the Oregon Unlawful Trade Practices Act. Number 13, pattern of unlawful activity in violation of the Utah Pattern of Unlawful Activity Act. Number 14, unjust enrichment. Number 15, declaratory judgment seeking to recover the substantial losses, compensatory, statutory, and punitive damages, attorney's fees, and all other appropriate relief. So they have added 2 new things. One is aiding and abetting conversion. 3 new things. One is aiding and abetting conversion. One is violation of Article 9 of the Utah Uniform Commercial Code. And one is a pattern of unlawful activity in violation of the Utah Pattern of Unlawful Activity Act. So I think this is the one that people are calling RICO. Okay, paragraph number 10. The parties' franchise agreement, executed in February 2023, contains a dispute resolution clause. This requires that disputes be first addressed in a face-to-face meeting in Orem, Utah. Then, if unresolved through mediation, they can do mediation. So first they have to have a meeting. Second, they have to go to mediation. If still they didn't, it didn't work out there, then they had to go through binding arbitration. Crystal and Ben say this first amended complaint is filed consistent with that clause. But if the dispute resolution clause purports to require mediation or binding arbitration, it's unenforceable for multiple reasons. So you can't force us into mediation, and this is why they're saying this includes that the arbitration clause was not the product of mutual assent. Bricks and Minifigs materially breached these dispute resolution, the dispute resolution process. The agreement's own carve-out provision exempts these claims. The clause is unconscionable, and Bricks and Minifigs is in default of the agreement anyway. So they can't try to hold us to the agreement. They're in default of that agreement. So no, we're not bound by that. It says, notwithstanding the foregoing, plaintiffs have substantially complied with the dispute resolution clause prerequisites. After pre-suit correspondence, we formally requested the contractually mandated face-to-face meeting. The parties conducted that meeting in February 2026 via video conference. Both parties had previously agreed to this via correspondence between their lawyers. In early February, this would satisfy the face-to-face meeting requirement. Plaintiffs also proposed mediation in good faith, including providing proposed mediator lists and available dates. But Bricks and Minifigs failed to cooperate in scheduling or completing mediation within a reasonable time. Plaintiffs, that's Crystal and Ben, have therefore satisfied or been excused from all conditions precedent to filing this action, both by their substantial compliance with the clause's procedural steps and independently, because the clause is not enforceable for the reasons below. Okay. So they say inapplicability of the arbitration clause. They're like, even though the franchise agreement even though the franchise agreement does contain an arbitration clause, they say the clause does not bar this court from hearing the claims for 6 independent reasons. And they give their reasons. One of them is BAM waived the right to arbitrate this case because they breached the dispute resolution process. Number 2, they say BAM bypassed every step of the process before acting. They never gave written notice of a face-to-face meeting. They never requested mediation. They never initiated the arbitration before terminating the franchise and seizing the store. They first invoked Section 17 in a letter from their lawyer in January 10th, 2025. This was nearly 2 months after the store was seized. So they didn't even, Crystal Law Gorman, she's like, they did this like 2 months after they took my store. What am I supposed to do with that at this point? Plaintiffs, Bricks and Minifigs first invoked Section 17, January 2025, nearly 2 months after the seizure of the store, and only after Crystal and Ben Gorman had demanded to be compensated, stating that it would commence the mediation and mandatory binding arbitration steps if Crystal Law and Ben Gorman did not accept the settlement terms. So this was like, we're going to go to arbitration if y'all don't take these settlement terms. But Bricks and Minifigs never actually initiated the arbitration. Instead, on November 14th, 2024, Bricks and Minifigs, or BAM Franchising Inc., dispatched an agent to the Salem store. Now, who's this agent? That'll be Brandon Best, who seized control of the business and changed the locks that same evening without prior notice, without discussion, without any attempt to follow the contractually mandated process. Earlier that same day, Bricks and Minifigs had met with plaintiffs to discuss a mutual separation, but gave no indication that it intended to seize the store hours later. Bricks and Minifigs' conduct is not merely inconsistent with the right to arbitrate. It constitutes a material breach of the arbitration agreement itself. A party that repudiates and circumvents that contract dispute resolution mechanism cannot later invoke that mechanism to its advantage. Oh, period. That's a good one. That is a good one. Hold on. Okay. Second, no valid agreement to arbitrate was formed. Third, the franchise agreement expressly exempts these claims from mediation and arbitration. Moreover, BAM waived any payment defaults independently. Fourth, BAM is in default of its obligation to proceed with arbitration. Fifth, BAM's conduct constitutes a total repudiation of the franchise agreement. Sixth, the arbitration clause is unconscionable and therefore not enforceable under generally applicable Utah contract law. This court has jurisdiction. Okay, so the parties, we know plaintiff Banff Salem 1, that's the company, the LLC that operated the store that is owned by Crystal and Ben. We also know Crystal and Ben. Okay, so defendant BAM Franchising Inc., a Delaware corporation originally incorporated in Oregon, and the franchisor of Bricks and Minifigs. Okay, so then now we get the two defendants who are added, or four, excuse me. Six defendants have been added. Defendant Baker Bricks, Utah Limited Liability Company, established May 2024 with its principal place of business in Utah. Information and belief, and as alleged in BAM's own verified pleading, its owners and managing officers include Brandon Best and Joshua Johnson. So this is awesome. They're using Crystal Law and Ben Gorman are using things that BAM said in their filing against Ben and Brian Mansell and Victor back against BAM in this other court case. Of the law Gormans against BAM. Defendant Salem Baker Bricks is the Oregon registered vehicle through which Baker Bricks LLC has operated the Salem, Oregon Bricks and Minifigs store since the events described herein. Its Oregon registration was filed November 15th, 2024. This is the day after Bricks and Minifigs terminated the franchise and seized the store. Whether Salem Baker is a separate corporation or an assumed business name of Baker Bricks, plaintiff can name it in both capacities. Defendants Brandon Best and Joshua Johnson are individuals who, on information and belief, reside in Utah. They are owners and managing officers of Baker Bricks, LLC. At all relevant times, they acted both individually and through Baker Bricks and Salem Baker Bricks. Defendant Matthew McNeff is an individual and an owner of BAM. The claims against him arise from his own conduct, and this is where the corporate veil is getting pierced, including representations that he personally made to plaintiffs, as alleged below. Defendant Ammon McNeff is an individual and an owner and chief executive officer of Bricks and Minifigs. The claims against him arise also from his own conduct in directing and participating in the acts described herein. So there's different stuff being described here, right? So Matt McNeff is being accused in this filing of many things, doing conduct of many types, but the conduct includes representations that he made to plaintiffs. But Ammon is being sued for conduct including directing and participating in the acts described herein. Then they're leaving room open for other defendants to still be named. These are the Doe defendants 1 through 10. General allegations: the Salem Bricks and Minifigs franchise, February 2023. The law Gormans, through their company, Banff Salem 1, purchased the Bricks and Minifigs franchise store in Salem. Bricks and Minifigs had actively solicited this purchase. Crystal was employed as the general manager of the store, and Bricks and Minifigs approached her about buying the franchise based on her successful management of the location. The purchase price under the business and asset purchase agreement was at least $65,000, could have been more, allocated approximately as follows. As part of the sale, Bricks and Minifigs was obligated to transfer. Okay, so as part of the sale, Bricks and Minifigs was obligated to transfer essential operating elements to Crystal and Ben. This included the store's business bank account and the lease for the store. The franchise agreement had an effective date of February 3rd, 2023, governed the parties' rights and duties. Bricks and Minifigs induced, kind of like lured the plaintiffs to purchase the Salem franchise through representations. Okay. The representations made in the franchise disclosure document. All right, so Crystal is saying, look, I read this franchise disclosure document and obviously believed the stuff in there was true. And Bricks and Minifigs knew that I would think it was true. And so because of that, I'm going to say they lured me into entering into this business contract by lying to me in the FDD. This included item 19, financial performance figures representing the average franchise revenue of about $500,000 a year. Claims that Bricks and Minifig stores were authorized Lego resellers, and representations that the Salem franchise was a fully operational turnkey business that would provide plaintiffs with complete operational control from day one. Plaintiffs reviewed, that's Crystal and Ben, reviewed that FDD and relied on those representations when they decided to enter into the franchise agreement, paid $65,000 for the franchise, and relocated to Salem, Oregon. Shortly after the sale closed, Bricks and Minifigs failed to fulfill its obligations. They did not properly transfer the bank account, and they did not transfer the lease to the plaintiff's LLC. These were not minor administrative oversights. They were fundamental obligations without which the franchisee could not operate the business. Without control of her own bank account, plaintiffs could not make the automated payments required under the franchise agreement. Without the lease in their name, plaintiffs had no direct relationship with the landlord and no ability to ensure that the rent was paid. Bricks and Minifigs' failure to complete these transfers was the first material breach of the franchise agreement. So this is what they're calling the first material breach, was the failure to transfer over things they were obligated to transfer, including the lease and the bank account. This was the proximate cause of every subsequent, quote, default that Bricks and Minifigs later cited as grounds for termination. Bricks and Minifigs did not return the bank's documents needed to change the account ownership. This caused the account to be frozen without Crystal and Ben's knowledge. As a result, automated payments for franchise royalties and for the remaining purchase price were not withdrawn as they were supposed to be. Similarly, because Bricks and Minifigs never assigned the store's lease to the Gorman's LLC, the landlord's notices of bounced ACH rent payments went to Bricks and Minifigs as the tenant of record. They did not come to plaintiffs. They didn't even know they were in a breach. Bricks and Minifigs did not promptly inform the plaintiffs of these issues. They basically concealed the problem until it had compounded. Plaintiffs thus could not pay rent through no fault of their own. The lease was not in their name, the bank account was frozen, and the party responsible for both of these failures, Bricks and Minifigs, kept plaintiffs in the dark. Bricks and Minifigs' own director of operations, that would be Kai McAllister, later confirmed this failure on a recorded call, admitting that the lease is technically in our name still. Once the problems came to light, plaintiffs worked with Bricks and Minifigs to rectify the defaults. Bricks and Minifigs finally completed the bank transfer. The account was reactivated, and the parties agreed to a restructured payment schedule for the missed royalties and purchase installments. So BAM finally fixed the issue, and they went into a payment plan. Great. Plaintiffs dutifully made the payments, and Bricks and Minifigs accepted them for many months without complaint or notice of any continuing default. Indeed, Bricks and Minifigs itself acknowledged in writing that it had retracted its prior breach claims. Okay, so it had they retracted. So Bricks and Minifigs like, look, we're not saying that you breached anymore. We're retracting those claims. They further confirmed that any earlier defaults had been resolved to Bricks and Minifigs' satisfaction. By late 2024, the Salem franchise was operating compliantly. Any earlier technical defaults had been cured or waived by mutual agreement and were precipitated by BAM's contract breaches in the first place. To the extent that Bricks and Minifigs and them want to contend that Crystal and Ben's acceptance of restructured payment terms is a ratification or a waiver of fraud claims, plaintiffs did not discover the full extent of Bricks and Minifigs fraud, including the complete absence of any Lego authorization. Now, this is important. I don't think I really paid as much attention to this, like, or found it to be. It didn't stand out to me as much during my first read through of this. Maybe it did. I don't remember. I mean, what is time? So much stuff has gone on in the meantime, but this is important to me now for sure. Plaintiffs, that's Crystal and Ben, did not discover the full extent of Bricks and Minifigs fraud, including the complete absence of any Lego authorization, until approximately the middle of 2025. Well, after this payment restructuring deal that they did, ratification requires full knowledge of the fraud, and the restructured payments address operational defaults only, not undiscovered pre-contractual misrepresentations. Okay, so now we get a little bit of editing here. Now this right here is mine, the pink. It says on November 8th, 2024. So this is about a week or less before the store takeover, the hostile takeover. November 8th, 2024, a telephone call of approximately 6.5 minutes with Bricks and Minifigs Director of Operations, Kai McAllister. Crystal Law informed Bricks and Minifigs that she and her husband had an opportunity to relocate abroad for Ben's work and asked to schedule a meeting to discuss options to sell or have Bricks and Minifigs repurchase the franchise. Crystal submitted nothing in writing. This was a preliminary inquiry. No formal notice of sale or termination was given, and plaintiffs never gave notice of any intention to terminate. In a recorded call a few days later, this would have been November 14th, 2024, this is the day of the takeover, Bricks and Minifigs Director of Operations, Kai McAllister, confirmed that the termination was precipitated by Crystal's inquiry. So in this call on the day that they did the hostile takeover, Kai McAllister said, yeah, I mean, you called and said that you wanted to leave from being a franchisee or whatever, so that's why you're getting canceled. That's why you're getting kicked out. He also stated, quote, Crystal did reach out to us, or he stated, quote, this is Kai McAllister. Quote, Crystal did reach out to us and talk about you guys moving out of the country and wanted to know like what would be needed to happen before that. And so what we did was we sat down on our end and we looked at the relationship that we have with you guys and where all the outstanding balances and everything. Now, when Ben Gorman, Crystal's husband, observed that the quote precipitating event for this was we reached out and said we're considering moving, and that got this whole ball rolling. Then Kai McAllister at first was like, no. He denied it. But then Mr. Gorman responded, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what you just said. At the time of the termination, the Salem franchise was operating with multiple employees. Payroll records from the morning after the seizure show 3 employees, Caledonia, Frank, and Mackenzie, had worked a combined 43 hours and 12 minutes during the week of November 4th through 10th, with a total payroll cost of $611, including taxes. The franchise was a going concern with payroll obligations when BAM terminated it. In response to Crystal's inquiry, Bricks and Minifigs scheduled a meeting for Thursday morning. That would be November 14th, 2024. Now, during that recorded meeting, Bricks and Minifigs representatives discussed what they characterized as a mutual separation, in which the store would, quote, revert to corporate. I like how it says revert instead of convert. That means it was already a corporate store at some point. They said that an individual connected to the Eugene, Oregon franchise, that would be Brandon Best, would come to inspect the store. Bricks and Minifigs said nothing during this meeting about its intent to immediately terminate the franchise or seize the store. Instead, Bricks and Minifigs used the meeting to lull plaintiffs into cooperation while simultaneously preparing the ambush-style takeover that occurred that same evening. So when they're on the phone with Chris that morning, they didn't say, hey, we're going to send Brandon Best over there tonight to kick you out of the store, change the locks. No, they said, oh, he might be interested in buying it. He's going to come over there and see it tonight. Bricks and Minifigs' response was unexpectedly aggressive. On November 14th, 2024, a BAM appointed representative arrived at the Salem store unannounced after business hours. Well, I don't know if it's unannounced because they did say somebody's coming over there tonight to look at it, right? During a recorded meeting, individual connected to the location would come and inspect the store. Oh, not that night. They didn't know that he was coming that night. Gotcha. Bricks and Minifigs did not say. Okay, right. So they said, yeah, we're going to have Brandon come over there. But apparently, according to this filing, it doesn't say it was that night. So Crystal and Ben didn't know when Brandon was going to come over there. And then that very same night, unannounced, Brandon shows up. He claimed the franchise was being terminated immediately and demanded the store keys. That representative was Brandon Best. Ring security camera footage from the store's register camera shows Brandon Best inside the store at 7:12 p.m. on November 14th, 2024, going through items at the counter. Bricks and Minifigs Director of Operations Kai McAllister directed and participated in the seizure by telephone on speakerphone rather than in person. Now, I don't know why they didn't add Kai to this. Kai McAllister should have been sued too. I mean, he would probably be able to say like he was just acting under what the employer told him to do or whatever. The camera system continued to detect people in the store through at least 8:34 p.m., establishing that the seizure operation lasted a minimum of 82 minutes. Bricks and Minifigs representatives threatened to call the police if Crystal and Ben did not comply. Okay, so here's like a lot. Here's a paragraph that has a lot of changes in it. On the recorded call, Kai McAllister pressed plaintiffs to accept Bricks and Minifigs' terms rather than try to fight. He framed Bricks and Minifigs' forbearance from pursuing its claimed $100,000 in damages as grace, right? So Bricks and Minifigs like, you owe us at least $100,000, and if we don't sue you, that'd be grace, but you better not fight us because then we'll sue you. When Ben Gorman asked whether Bricks and Minifigs' approach sounded like grace, Kai McAllister said, quote, "It sounds like a threat. And I can acknowledge you feeling that because in a way it is." Kai McAllister thus acknowledged in his own words on tape that Bricks and Minifigs' demand was backed by a threat. Faced with this ultimatum and explicit threats, Crystal and Ben felt they had no other choice but to yield the keys under duress. When Ben Gorman asked whether Kai McAllister had the authority to negotiate these termination terms, he said, "I don't." Kai McAllister said, "No, I don't have the authority to make changes to the contract, and no one with the authority to make changes to the contract would make changes to the contract." Okay. Bricks and Minifigs thus presented plaintiffs with a non-negotiable, take it or leave it ultimatum backed by explicit threats. Ooh. Sue me then. Sue me then. Sue me then. Okay. Done. The next day after the takeover was November 15th, 2024. Crystal was required to surrender additional keys and the store safe combination to BAM's representative. Ring doorbell video captured Crystal identifying each key, the mailbox key, the back store room key, and the safe key, and providing the safe combination. This occurred after BAM had already changed the locks the night before, underscoring that plaintiffs had no meaningful choice in the matter. The formal notice of immediate termination wasn't delivered until several hours after. BAM's agent was already physically present in the store demanding the keys. Bricks and Minifigs acted first and papered it later. The agent arrived and began the takeover without any written notice having been provided. Wow, that's crazy. I mean, we knew this, but it's like, imagine you're a judge seeing this for the first time. Or the second time, I guess, because the judge probably already read this before. Okay, Miss Law refused to hand over the keys until she received written documentation, and only after she insisted did Bricks and Minifigs lawyers finally email the termination letter that evening alleging material breaches and invoking Section 14A of the franchise agreement to terminate without opportunity to cure. Okay, so they had no opportunity to cure, really no notice, and no written notice either, like no written termination. The chronology, the timing, demonstrates that the termination was fait accompli I don't know what that means. Before the formal notice existed. Indeed, while Bricks and Minifigs agent was physically inside the store, that's that's Brandon Best, physically inside the store, and plaintiffs were, that's Crystal and Ben, frantically photographing inventory to document what was being taken. Crystal said on video, quote, "And I still haven't. You might want to let them know. Send me that email." This is her confirming the termination notice had not yet been sent, even as the seizure was already underway. The alleged breaches listed in the termination letter were a failure to timely pay royalties, which was about $25,000, failure to pay rent timely, which was about $23,000, and the remaining franchise purchase balance, which is $48,000. Now, this is interesting to me because the FDD says that they don't offer financing to franchisees, but if they did this with the Gormans, then they did finance that purchase. Thank you to Yvette for the 6 jewels. Thank you to Randall for the 440 jewels. Thank you to Osacharlita becoming a new member. Fisherman's Friend lozenges are great for that tickling cough. Okay, I don't know what that is. Thank you so much for the $5. Thank you. I'll take a look into that. I don't know how to pronounce this. Fait accompli, an established act which has already happened, so it practically can't be overturned. French phrase meaning an accomplished fact. Got it. They got a strong arm for the bricks, the minifigs, and the lease and the store. Yes, they did. Okay. These were the very payment issues Bricks and Minifigs knew resulted from its own failure to transfer the bank account and the lease. These are issues that had already been addressed through the restructured payment arrangements that Bricks and Minifigs had accepted. Simultaneously with the physical takeover, Bricks and Minifigs removed plaintiffs' access to all electronic business systems, including the franchise's email accounts, Slack communication platform, inventory tracking spreadsheets maintained in Google Sheets, bookkeeping and accounting software, and all other operational platforms. This wholesale revocation destroyed Crystal and Ben's ability to access, preserve, or document their own business records that Bricks and Minifigs has since selectively cited in correspondence to support its version of events while refusing to provide complete copies to the Gormans. BAM's selective preservation and production of electronically stored information, combined with its revocation of plaintiffs' access to those same records, has deprived plaintiffs of the ability to verify Bricks and Minifigs post-termination claims. So basically, they're saying, look, they took access to all the records from us. And then they just made all these claims post-termination, but we don't believe them, and we have a right to see those documents. And we haven't seen them. Further evincing the collusion, the Salem Bricks and Minifigs website was configured. So the Salem store website, which we know from the operating agreement, is, or at least I don't remember, was it the BAM map or the ops map? One of them. The website is all kind of run by Bricks and Minifigs, and each store has its own extension on the website, but Bricks and Minifigs maintains primary control over all the stores' websites, which calls into question, in my opinion, is that really independently owned and operated? Bricks and Minifigs also failed to cancel. Further events in collusion, the Salem Bricks and Minifigs website was configured so that its Shop Now button redirected customers to the Eugene franchise location. Okay, so Salem shop, if you go to the Salem website and you click Shop Now, really it actually used to just send you to the Eugene store. That's Brandon Best's other store, or one of his other ones at these times. I don't know who owns them now. Bricks and Minifigs also failed to cancel or return the promissory note executed by plaintiffs as part of the original franchise purchase. Despite seizing all franchise assets and purported satisfaction of amounts owed, Bricks and Minifigs has never provided any confirmation that the note was satisfied, canceled, or discharged, leaving plaintiffs exposed to the possibility that Bricks and Minifigs may attempt to collect on the note, in addition to retaining all the assets. In the termination letter, Bricks and Minifigs demanded that Chris Law and Ben Gorman adhered to post-termination obligations, and they offered to waive approximately $97,000 in claimed amounts if plaintiffs agreed to surrender all assets and release any claims against BAM. So they're like, look, by our own calculations, we're not going to show you the papers. We're not going to show you the papers, but by our own calculations, we think you owe us $97,000. You could pay us that. You owe it to us, or we'll just let you off the hook. You don't have to pay it to us. But if you don't want to pay us the $97,000 that we decided on our own that you owe us, we're not going to give you any proof. Then we might sue you. Who knows? But if you want us to forgive you of this $97,000, we can do that. Only thing you have to do is give me every single thing inside the store and never sue us. This offer, they put offer in quotes, amounted to demanding plaintiffs walk away with nothing. That is devastating. The franchise agreement granted BAM an option exercisable within 10 days to initiate a fair market value appraisal process and purchase the assets. So look, in the franchise agreement, Bricks and Minifigs can do this. However, what they have to do is get a third party to appraise the value of the business. They can't just decide how much it's worth, according to their own franchise agreement that they signed. Bricks and Minifigs made a written election to exercise that option in full, expressly stating that Bricks and Minifigs will be exercising all of its post-termination rights under the franchise agreement, including appraisal notice. Once Bricks and Minifigs made that written election, it was bound by the appraisal. So they said they were going to get an appraisal and they never did. They materially breached its elected obligation. They never delivered an appraisal notice. They never initiated a fair market value determination process. They never made an offer to purchase the assets, but they simultaneously retained physical possession of all the assets. They transferred them to new operators without any accounting. In addition, and independently, because Bricks and Minifigs held a security interest in plaintiff's inventory and equipment under the security agreement executed at closing, Bricks and Minifigs' remedy upon default was governed by UCC Article 9. This required commercially reasonable disposition. Reasonable, quote, advance notice. They needed to give advance notice. They needed to give an accounting. They did not do that. They conducted no commercially reasonable sale, gave no notice, and provided no accounting. This entitles plaintiffs to statutory damages under Utah Code. They also failed to initiate an appraisal process, even though it expressly elected to go that route. No appraisal, no inventory, no accounting of seized assets has ever been provided for over a year since the termination. Plaintiffs documented the scope and seizure in real time. On the evening of November 14th, the night of the seizure, plaintiffs took approximately 220 photographs. That's Crystal Law Gorman. They took about 220 photographs, 11 videos, and they cataloged every category of inventory in the store as it was being seized. The documentation shows sealed and certified sets, as well as minifigs, keychains, pencils, lunch sets, loose Lego bricks. Price tags in the photographs that are visible range from $5 to at least $299 per individual item. Okay, so now they get into the consigned Lego set. Okay, so this is enter the chat, Brian Mansell's Legos. At the time of the takeover, the Salem store held certain high-value Lego sets that were not owned by Banff Salem 1. These sets consisted primarily of retired, sealed Star Wars sets that are among the rarest and most valuable Lego products in existence. This belonged to a third-party collector, Brian Mansell, who had consigned them to the store for sale under a written consignment agreement. The collection comprised over 780 sets, 1,200 minifigs. Okay, so plaintiffs' contemporaneous consignment records value the collection at approximately $70,000 to $120,000, and they reflect approximately $19,000 in consignment sales through the last period, reconciled before the seizure, the proceeds of which were paid to Brian Mansell by monthly check. Okay, so before the seizure, she was paying Brian Mansell monthly. Okay. She had sold approximately $19,425.95 of the consignment. So that's about 20,000. So still $50 to $100,000 worth of inventory by Crystal Law's own consignment records. So there's different prices for the valuation here. Okay. So like different people think that the set is worth different amounts of money. All right. So for Crystal Law Gorman, what she's saying here is, according to my records that I had in my store, I think that his set was worth anywhere from 70,000 to 100,000. Excuse me, 70,000 to 120,000. Now, this is a slightly different number, I think, than CoffeeZilla, slightly different number than what was previously given. As you can see, it used to say in the first version of the complaint was around 250,000, but instead of 250,000, now it's her contemporaneous consignment records. Because originally it was like, okay, it was worth about 250,000. Now she's saying, well, according to my actual consignment records, the collection was about 70 to 120,000. I had sold about 20,000 of it, so it was like $50 to $100,000 worth of stuff still in that store from Brian's collection. And what is she basing this on? The consignment records that she kept. And she says Brian was paid every month. Crystal and Ben's own records, therefore, consigned inventory worth $50,000 to $80,000 remained. I think 50 to 100, right? Because if it was up to 120,000 and she sold 19, 120,000 minus 20,000 is 100,000. So 50 to 100,000 remained in the store when BAM seized it. Now, Brian Mansell values the collection he consigned considerably higher. Okay, so they're pointing it out even in the lawsuit. Look, we have our own records we kept. We think it's about this much. However, that being said, Brian Mansell thinks it's much more. The precise value and the complete record of the consignment sales in the final months before the seizure cannot be determined without the store's point of sale records, which Bricks and Minifigs seized, controls, and has refused to produce. The collection owner, that's Brian, has subsequently prepared handwritten inventory lists documenting each consignment set by Lego item number, organized by month of consignment, and verified the inventory with signed attestation reading verified above his signature, Brian Mansell, confirming the specific sets had been placed at the Salem store on consignment. BAM's agents seized these consigned items along with the store's other inventory, despite having no ownership interest in them whatsoever. BAM's agent, Kai McAllister, stated clearly in a recorded communication on the night of the takeover that Bricks and Minifigs corporate office was assuming responsibility for the consignment agreement. He did say that. He takes over all that. That's part of the business. He takes over all that as part of the business. An admission that Bricks and Minifigs knowingly took custody of property it knew belonged to a third party, and they accepted the obligations attendant to that custody. The day after the takeover, Crystal Law tried to address the outstanding consignment obligations with Bricks and Minifigs representatives. In a recorded conversation, Crystal stated that the consignment collection owner has not been paid his percentage yet. She said, "If I don't have my tickets, I don't know how much I need to pay." BAM's representative dismissed her concerns, saying, "Crystal, ultimately that's a business thing." That's what Kai McAllister said. "That's not necessarily you. Brandon will take and be taking on the business. He takes on all of that kind of liability." Bricks and Minifigs thus knowingly disregarded the third-party consignment obligations. Crystal had placed identification tags and stickers on every consigned item to track it separately from the store's own inventory, and she maintained video documentation of the tagged items. After this takeover, however, the new operators, that'd be Josh and Brandon, systematically removed all of the identification tags from the consigned sets. This is conduct that evinces an intent to convert the collection and conceal its separate ownership. In addition to the consignment collection, Bricks and Minifigs seized customer layaway items that belonged to neither Bricks and Minifigs or BAM. Photographs taken during the takeover document Lego Star Wars sets, handwritten sticky notes, hold for Walker, layaway, price of $450, as well as a retired Lego Ewok village. Okay, girl, I cannot escape the Ewok village. These items were being held for specific customers who had paid deposits. BAM's seizure of customer layaway property further demonstrates the indiscriminate nature of the taking. Making matters worse, Bricks and Minifigs agents and the new franchise operators, that's Josh and Brandon, later told the collection's owner Crystal had taken or stolen these sets during the transition. But this was false. A video recording captured one of the new operators stating that he had just called corporate in Utah and was told by Bricks and Minifigs principals to make these accusations. A video recording captured one of the new operators stating he had just called corporate in Utah. He was told by Bricks and Minifigs principals to make these accusations against Crystal. The false statements were not the independent acts of a rogue franchisee. These were directed and coordinated by Bricks and Minifigs corporate. An independent third-party documentarian was present at Bricks and Minifigs corporate office and is identified on video recordings that captured these events and statements. This false accusation was calculated to shift blame. So this is the defamation aspect. From plaintiffs, and has exposed plaintiffs to claims from the collection owner while damaging their reputation with him. That means Brian Mansell. They're like, look, they lied to Brian Mansell about me, and that exposed me to liability. Now they get into the actual defamation or the claims of defamation against Bricks and Minifigs. Bricks and Minifigs false statements to Brian Mansell accusing Crystal Law of taking stuff she did not take constitutes defamation per se. It imputes theft and dishonesty in business. On information and belief, Bricks and Minifigs and its agents have made similar disparaging statements to others in the franchising community, to Lego corporate, to Lego itself, actual Lego. Oh my God. And to the cops. The new operators have publicly responded to online customer reviews by accusing Crystal Law of stealing from the store. They repeated these false allegations on Google reviews and social media platforms visible to the public. These statements have been ongoing and have contributed to a third-party collector pursuing a criminal complaint against plaintiffs with the Kaiser, Oregon Police Department and the local district attorney's office, a complaint premised entirely on Bricks and Minifigs' false narrative that Crystal took the sets. These defamatory statements have caused Crystal and Ben Gorman a significant reputational harm, humiliation, and loss of standing in the business community. And they go on to talk about Kai McAllister. He warned plaintiffs against speaking publicly about BAM. He cautioned them that the termination agreement contained provisions that would apply if they sought to go after BAM or if they sought to defame BAM. That adding moments later that plaintiffs could, quote, say whatever they want to say. Just be aware there are our legal consequences. This statement was itself an attempt to intimidate plaintiffs into silence regarding Bricks and Minifigs' wrongful conduct and demonstrates Bricks and Minifigs' consciousness of guilt. On information and belief, Bricks and Minifigs' conduct toward plaintiffs is not isolated. So this is not an isolated incident, according to Crystal and Ben. In written correspondence to Lego's CEO or their chief executive, the consignment collection owner, Brian Mansell, reported that Bricks and Minifigs has turned out to have a pattern in Oregon of seizing stores to steal assets. This was Kaiser and Canby, as well as a recent event involving over $200,000 of Lego products being stolen and resold in Springfield, Oregon. This pattern of similar conduct is relevant to BAM's scienter, intent, and motivation and supports plaintiff's claim for punitive damages. Okay, so then this whole section, actually the rest of the next several pages appears to be all new. Okay, so now we're getting into the new stuff. This is all new stuff, starting pretty much here. Page 14 of 43, the pre-arranged replacement. Baker Bricks, Brandon Best, and Joshua Johnson. On May 2nd, 2024, more than 6 months before Bricks and Minifigs terminated the franchise agreement for Crystal and Ben, defendants Brandon Best and Joshua Johnson organized this company, Baker Bricks, LLC, in Utah. Now, Bricks and Minifigs has admitted this formation and its date in its own verified pleading, against Ben Schneider. About 6 months later or so, November 14th, 2024, while Bricks and Minifigs agents were seizing the store, defendant Brandon Best, acting as BAM's contracted inventory inspector, secured the location and conducted an inventory of plaintiff's store and its contents for Bricks and Minifigs. So he did this inventorying for Bricks and Minifigs. Like, he was contracted as their inventory inspector. Bricks and Minifigs has acknowledged in court, admitted all this stuff in the verified complaint against Ben. Brandon was engaged as a contracted inventory inspector for Bricks and Minifigs and was requested to inspect the inventory. A verified pleading is an evidentiary admission of the party who made it. So they admitted, Brandon was an agent of the store, of the corporate, not just this little random franchise owner. Now, the very next day, Baker Bricks registered Salem Baker Bricks with the Oregon Secretary of State as the vehicle through which it would operate the Salem Kaiser Bricks and Minifigs store. Bricks and Minifigs has admitted this registration and its date. By a business asset purchase agreement dated March 27th, 2025, Bricks and Minifigs transferred the Salem store from corporate to Baker Bricks. Now, this included all the assets, together with the consignment, the layaway goods that didn't even belong to Crystal. They actually belonged to third parties. On information and belief, the sequence described above, the formation of the replacement entity more than 6 months before termination, the entity's principal, the owner, securing and inventorying the store on the night of the seizure. That's Brandon Best doing his inventory that night. The registration of an Oregon vehicle to operate the store the very next day, and the transfer of plaintiff's business and assets to that entity. According to Crystal Law and Ben Gorman and their lawyer, that reflects the plaintiff's termination was planned in advance. It was executed to recapture and resell plaintiff's store and its contents. It was not to remedy any genuine default. Bricks and Minifigs' own disclosures reflect systemic franchisee turnover. And this is where I started saying, oh, they're going scheme. They're not just saying, oh, we were wronged. They're saying we were wronged and other people get wronged just like this. Let me show you what I mean. BAM's franchise disclosure documents, that's those FDDs, filed with the state franchise regulators, disclose a recurring outlet turnover. This includes franchise terminations, non-renewals, reacquisitions of outlets by the franchisor. For example, Bricks and Minifigs 2026 franchise disclosure document discloses that in fiscal year 2025 alone, BAM terminated 2 franchised outlets, reacquired a third, and recorded a fourth as having ceased operations for other reasons. On information and belief, and subject to confirmation through discovery, exit records, and reacquisition transitions, franchisor forced exits recur throughout Bricks and Minifigs system. On June 4th, 2026, Bricks and Minifigs publicly announced the permanent closure of its Salem, Oregon store, a mutual agreement to part ways with franchise owners. Remember that, part ways? With franchise owners Brandon Best and Joshua Johnson. The Salem store thus has been churned through 2 ownership turnovers in approximately 19 months. This is the same location that was seized from the plaintiffs. Now, their next section is defendants, Bricks and Minifigs, Josh, Brandon, Ammon, Matt, they all profited from these seized assets. Following the seizure, the inventory, including the consignment, that's Brian Mansell's stuff, was sold through the store under Baker Bricks operation. This is Brandon and Josh. On information and belief, the proceeds of those sales materially exceeded any amount ever paid or credited to Crystal or the consignors. Defendant's own verified pleading, that's BAM, Bricks and Minifigs' own verified pleading, admits they took this stuff and they refute the theft accusation. But their very own verified pleading, sworn under oath by Ammon, the CEO, and by Josh, manager of Baker Bricks, They admit the manner of the taking. They allege Bricks and Minifigs exercised its priority rights to the collateral in the security agreement. They repossessed the store and they assumed any and all fixtures, inventory, and other assets. They then unilaterally credited an estimated $38,000, just came up with that number out of nowhere, as an offset to BAM's claimed debt. By their own sworn admission, Bricks and Minifigs seized and retained all of the store's assets and assigned them a value that BAM decided on their own. They didn't get it like actually appraised. Without the commercially reasonable disposition that is required by the franchise agreement, without the advance notice that is required by the franchise agreement, and without the accounting that is required by Article 9 of the UCC. Defendants, that's Bricks and Minifigs, have likewise admitted facts that refute this accusation. That Miss Law stole or took the consigned sets. In the same verified pleading, defendants, that's BAM and them, allege that in late 2025, defendants Joshua Johnson and Brandon Best, quote, located a few, approximately 20 Star Wars Lego sets in a back office lockable cupboard. They noticed stickers that were not previously recognized and directed that these items not be sold from the inventory, and they remain locked up. The stickers were, Crystal thinks and Ben thinks, these were the yellow stickers that were supposed to identify the labels, that were supposed to identify Brian's collection to distinguish them from the rest of the inventory in the store. Defendant's admission confirms that consigned sets bearing the identification labels, that's those yellow stickers, remained in the store after the seizure. In defendant's possession and control, they were not removed by Crystal Law, and defendants Baker Bricks, Brandon Best, Joshua Johnson actually were the ones who exercised dominion over them. Furthermore, Bricks and Minifigs verified pleading further admits Brandon Best's role and presence in this whole scheme. It describes Brandon as BAM's representative who conducted an informal and video inventory. The inventory at the time of the repossession. It also alleges that Brandon Best secured the location incident to the termination and completed the inventory. These are sworn admissions. They confirm that Brandon Best was physically present at the seizure, exercising control over the store and its contents, and acting for BAM. Okay, so they can't just point the finger at him. Independently owned and operated. No, they literally said in a filing under penalty of perjury, he was their agent. He was their representative. The same verified pleading admits Ammon McNeff, Matthew McNeff are owners, executive officers, and principals of Bricks and Minifigs, and Ammon serves as the chief executive officer. It further admits that before the sale, Crystal was employed at the store. So also a corporate employee and a store manager at Bricks and Minifigs' then corporate operated Salem location. She expressed interest in becoming a franchisee, and BAM agreed to her proposed private franchisee affiliation and purchase transaction within BAM's established franchise agreement structure. These sworn admissions confirm the individual defendant's authority over the conduct alleged here and confirm that Bricks and Minifigs knowingly approved knowingly approved and structured plaintiff's acquisition. Okay, so this is basically just tying Brandon Best into this scheme. In case Brandon tries to say, oh, no, anything to do with corporate or whatever, or they try to say like, no, he's an independent guy or whatever. Like Crystal's like, yeah, okay, that's not what you said in the Y'all versus Ben lawsuit. So I'm just gonna make sure the judge knows about that. Thanks so much to Gino for the 6 jewels. Thanks so much to Rose for the $2 super chat. Ken Dickle judge for FA girl, what? Ken, I'm assuming this is a declaratory judgment for franchise agreement unconscionability transfer to other franchisees who signed the exact same franchise agreement with the same franchise provisions. Short answer, I don't know. But if I had to guess, I would say probably, especially if the franchise agreements themselves have identical provisions. However, contract law, doesn't it vary from state to state? So maybe this would only count for the jurisdiction they're in, which is Oregon. I don't know. The short answer is I don't know, but that would be good if it could, because then that would allow other people to get out of their contracts, right? Without having to go to court or something. Thank you, Holly, for the jewels. Thank you, Sugar. Thank you, Hippo, for the jewels. I do too. I love that they are using BAM's own statements and verified court documents against them, because if those aren't true, now they perjured themselves. Right, right. Okay, so the next section is called the fraud scheme. So this should be good. Bricks and Minifigs breach engineering and recapture playbook. Woo! Bricks and Minifigs is breach engineering. So they engineer these breaches to recapture the stores and the assets and the inventory. And this is a playbook. Okay. Breach engineering and recapture playbook. On information and belief, the events described above were not the product of a franchise relationship that soured, but rather the execution of a recurring scheme that Bricks and Minifigs has deployed against multiple franchisees. The fraud scheme proceeds in a repeated sequence. A, induce. Okay, so here's the sequence. Here's the playbook. A, number one, first thing, induce the purchase with inflated gross revenue representations and false affiliation claims. Now, just to remind y'all, this entire paragraph, indeed, this entire page is a brand new page from a brand new entry. These are brand new allegations, strictly speaking, even though they do seem related to the other ones. And we're talking about a fraud scheme. Fraud scheme. The fraud. What's the fraud scheme being alleged here? Well, there's a playbook. Bricks and Minifigs creates problems, then hold the franchisees responsible for the problems, and then steal their store. That's the allegation. Have to be sorted out in court. But there's a playbook. So step one is to induce, to lure in these franchisees, these potential franchisees with lies, pretty much. They lie about how much money that they could expect to make, and they lie about being affiliated with Lego. That's the claim. Number two, or the step B or whatever in the playbook, is to target first-time franchise owners who invest personal savings and they lack franchising experience. Okay, so induce people with lies, target people who don't have a lot of experience. 3, withhold from these new franchisees the very operational assets and controls that the purchase documents are supposed to convey. So they, not only do they induce with lies, not only do they target people who may be easier, more vulnerable to target, but then they also set you up to fail by not actually transferring your lease over, not actually transferring your bank account over. The fourth step, in this playbook is to allow the withheld controls to generate inevitable payment and performance defaults. Okay. Inevitable defaults. So they create the default and then they allow the defaults to get worse. The next step in the playbook is to lull the franchisee with accepted workouts, meaning let's come to an agreement on this so we don't have to terminate your settlement. And they write these retractions out, Bricks and Minifigs, but quietly they're already arranging a successor operator. Okay, so again, acting in bad faith. They're on the one side of their mouth, on the one side, they're saying, oh yeah, we can work it out. Oh yeah, our bad, our fault. Oopsie. Now that we have it figured out, we'll do a repayment plan. All the while they're in contact with the likes of like Brandon Best and Joshua Johnson types to steal the store back. That's what Crystal and Ben are alleging. If it's in blue, it's new. If it's in red, it's dead. That's a good one. Fraud. 1 million, bajillion, cajillion %. That's fake. That's a class 2 misdemeanor. Okay. lull the franchisee. Okay, so make the franchisee feel like, look, you don't have to pay it all right now. Don't worry about it. We'll do you a payment plan. Meanwhile, they're about to take their store from them. F, terminate by ambush. Without notice, without a genuine opportunity to cure, seize the store extrajudicially. The next step in the playbook, keep the franchise fee, keep the purchase price, keep the inventory, keep the assets, keep the consigned and customer goods, keep the going concern value while assigning the seized assets of a self-serving value. Okay. So basically, they keep everything and then they're the ones who get to decide how much it's worth with no oversight. The last step in this supposed fraud playbook is refranchise or resell the location, often to insiders. Now, this right here is where I was like, Ricola. Okay, Rico. Now, I'm calling it RICO because that's the name of the federal statute. The racketeering, something, what is it? Racketeering, RICO, influence, corrupt organization, racketeering, influence. Is it influence? Let me just, influenced. Racketeer Influenced Corrupt Organizations Act is the federal statute. It is meant to target and dismantle organized crime syndicates such as the mafia by prosecuting the leaders of an organized criminal ring for an ongoing pattern of criminal activity. The enterprise prosecutors have to show there's a structured group or an enterprise. There are insiders to talk about. The defendant must commit at least 2 predicate crimes of a list of 35, including fraud, extortion, bribery, drug trafficking, etc. And this has to happen within a 10-year period. And there's a broader reach, allowing authorities to charge. Now, that's the federal one. But the federal one talks about racketeering organizations. So if there's an organization, then this would be the insiders. Now, just be very clear. This is a civil case. This is not a criminal case. It's just allegations at this point being made by Crystal Law now and her husband and their business. That being said, I mean, I've seen a lot of the stuff that they're pointing to here in the public record, and it looks like pretty much everything they're saying is checked out. So anyway, step 1, the lure. BAM's item 19 on the 2023 FDD, now this is the one that Crystal Law would have read and been depending upon, represented an average annual gross revenue of about $500,000 a year, with a range from $182,000 to $986,000. Those figures reflect gross revenue only. Item 19's own fine print concedes that they do not reflect any of the costs of sales, operating expenses, or other costs or expenses that must be deducted from the gross sales revenue to obtain your net income. Bricks and Minifigs presented those figures to plaintiffs as indicative of profitability and business value, and they did so principally in written materials, the FDD, and a prospectus transmitted to plaintiffs through BAM's corporate Slack platform and the store email account without disclosing the qualifications. Both channels were Bricks and Minifigs' own systems. Bricks and Minifigs revoked plaintiffs' access to each at the moment of the seizure. So the materials that induced the purchase are today in Bricks and Minifigs' exclusive possession. Girl, you should have printed that out. Coupled with the false representations that Bricks and Minifigs stores were authorized Lego resellers, because at the time, I guess they were not. I mean, it says false representations. That they were authorized Lego resellers and that the Salem store was a turnkey operation. The item 19 figures were the bait. Wah, wah. Okay, so what was the bait in this lure, in this bait and switch? The bait was this amount of money. This is how much you're going to make, everybody. Here's the FDD. Also, the bait. We're authorized Lego retailers, or whatever they said. Crystal and Ben said that was false. And they lured us to believing that. They also said this was supposedly a turnkey operation. This is all bait. Bricks and Minifigs continues to lead with headline revenue figures. In its 2025 FDD, item 19 represents an average franchisee revenue of even more. This one, 538,000, so 30,000 more across 89 reporting units, median being 489,000, highest being 1.4 million. And discloses average gross margins of 56 to 65% by quartile. Who's Cooper? A system-wide profitability picture irreconcilable with what BAM franchisees, including plaintiffs and Cooper, who's that, actually experience after BAM's interference. Step 2 of the fraud scheme playbook. Woo, girl. The target profile. So they target certain types of people to victimize with this fraud scheme, according to this lawsuit. On information and belief, Bricks and Minifigs directs its franchise sales to prospective owners who have never owned a franchise, who invest personal and family savings, and who do not retain franchise counsel or financial advisors before signing. These are facts that Bricks and Minifigs learns through its own application and onboarding process. So they ask you, do you have a financial advisor? Do you have a franchise lawyer? Are you paying with your own money or family money? Or are you going to be financing them? You're going to use a business, going to be part of your other businesses? They say no, they target a certain type of person. And Crystal and Ben are saying that we fit that profile. We invested over $200,000 of our own personal resources. We never before purchased a franchise. We relied on Bricks and Minifigs representations rather than independent advisors. Oh, Christina Cooper. This is that other plaintiff. We read this lawsuit on this page. Christina Cooper, the Canby, Oregon franchisee whose parallel experience is described below, fit it more starkly still. A woman over 65 in poor health who invested life savings exceeding $120,000. The scheme depends on counterparties who cannot easily absorb the loss, nor can they finance litigation needed to contest the loss. Okay. So to recap, number one in the fraud scheme, number one step in the alleged fraud scheme is to lure people with lying. Just lie. Just say they're going to make all this money they're not going to make. Just, say that it's a turnkey. Say that it's, Lego loves them and stuff, and just get them in the door. However, you're not just getting anybody in the door. First, you got to target the right type of person. And it's generally what the legal term of art calls an unsophisticated business person. That doesn't mean unsophisticated business person. Generally, in this particular case, will be somebody who had not had franchise experience and didn't know the red flags to look out for. Now, what's the next step in this supposed alleged fraud scheme? Engineering dependence. When you look at this, it kind of almost feels like the same playbook so far as like somebody getting into an abusive relationship. Step 1, love bombing. It's basically a lie. The person's acting like they're nicer and better than they really are, or maybe they're pretending that they have like a stable job and they don't, or they're just lying to you, right? Lure you in. But once they realize you're a certain type of person, and this is not to victim blame at all whatsoever. They do go after like really nice people, these abusers. They go after people who want to see the good in others. They want to see the benefit of the doubt in others. They don't want to just jump to conclusions of like, nope, he's an abuser, gotta go. They kind of test you out as step 2. Step 3. Engineered dependence. It's literally called codependence. Engineered dependence. Like whenever, somebody might start, we'll say a woman might start dating an abusive man, right? He might get her to quit her job. Oh, you don't need that job, baby. I'll pay for everything. I'll pay all the bills. All you have to do is be pretty and stay at home, kind of thing. But then before you know it, she'll have no savings and no money, and now she can't leave this freak. Although the business and asset purchase agreement defined the conveyed assets to include the store's bank accounts, social media accounts, and the assignment of lease rights, Bricks and Minifigs never conveyed them. It retained the store's bank account. It kept the lease in its own name, as its director of operations admitted. November 14th phone call, quote, the lease is technically in our name still. They also retained the point of sale system. They retained the email. They retained the bookkeeping access that it later revoked. That's weird. Who does the bookkeeping? Who does the bookkeeping? I'm still looking at that Centra Wealth Solutions off the back end. Anyway, as alleged in paragraph 125D, Bricks and Minifigs routinely retain control of bank accounts and leases across its franchise system. This is what would make it a scheme and not a one-off. This is what it makes it a pattern or practice, a pattern. This wasn't just being sloppy. The retained controls are the tripwires of the scheme. Step 4, manufacturing the breach. So really, it's just like an abuse victim. Really, she might not have done anything wrong. But if the narcissist or the abuser is just in a bad mood that day, you did something wrong today. The withheld controls, meaning when Bricks and Minifigs kept the lease, when Bricks and Minifigs kept the bank account in its name, these withheld controls did exactly what they were designed to do. The frozen bank account disrupted Crystal and Ben's ability to make any payments or document any payments. The lease held in Bricks and Minifigs' name generated rent arrears, an obligation that Bricks and Minifigs itself controlled. The withheld operational systems prevented the clean financial records from Bricks and Minifigs from being created, and then Bricks and Minifigs would later demand these records that Crystal could not possibly produce for them because she didn't have the controls of that system. Bricks and Minifigs cited in its November 14th, 2024 termination letter traces to an asset or control that Bricks and Minifigs promised to convey, but it did not. These are defaults of BAM's own making. Now, these are allegations in a lawsuit. Of course, this is going to go to court. We'll have to see what a jury decides. Step 5 of this alleged fraud scheme is the lull. Now, they've already lulled up here. Oh, no, lure. Excuse me. Lure, not lull. Okay. So now this is the lull. The lull. Just to remind y'all, what are the steps as they are being named? Step 1, the lure. So you're given all these, oh yeah, $500,000. Yeah. Step 2, target a certain type of person to victimize. Step 3, engineer dependence upon BAM to where you can never get out from under them. Step 4, manufacture a fake default or a fake breach because of step 3, where you engineered that independence. And then step 5, make the people think it's going to be all right and they're not actually going to be in trouble. With these engineered defaults accumulated, Bricks and Minifigs accepted restructured payments. So payment plan. Retracted claimed defaults in writing. So they took away these defaults. Look, you don't have to worry about it. We're going to even put it in writing. Oh, oops, our bad. And encouraged plaintiffs to continue investing labor and inventory into the store. Conduct that waived the claim defaults and, more importantly, kept the store's value growing for the harvest. Oh, that sounds ominous. The harvest. Oh. Bricks and Minifigs Director of Operations Kai McAllister acknowledged as much on the recorded call. Plaintiffs, quote, did the work, kept the store open. The store's monthly sales had risen from approximately $10,000 when Crystal took over as manager. It doubled to about $20,000 to $25,000 per month. And it also held at that level throughout Crystal's ownership. Shout out to her. That's when Bricks and Minifigs struck. Those figures, roughly half the average annual revenue Bricks and Minifigs represented in item 19, are recorded in the point of sale data royalty ledgers that BAM seized and retained. This is huge. I'm going to put a box around this. This is very important. This is very important to me, in my opinion. So what Crystal's saying is, remember number 1 up here when they had said, oh, you're going to make so much money. This is actually step 1, the lure. The lowest store makes 182,000 gross and up to 986. So Crystal Law is saying, yeah, sure. That's a problem. Why? Because when I took the store over, they were making about $10,000 in monthly sales. That's not revenue. just sales, right? Because you got to pay your employees, you got to pay your electricity bill, you got to pay, keep the water running, you got to pay whatever you got to pay. So all the stuff you got to pay gets taken out of those sales. Plus, a lot of that inventory you already bought. So you're not getting 100%. It's like, okay, you made the order of Legos, but now you got to sell them. Maybe you're only getting 30% of those sales at all because you already bought that inventory. It's not like the inventory was free. You got to buy it. So Crystal said, look, when I took over this store, they were making about $10,000 a month. I got it up to $20,000 to $25,000 a month. And even though I doubled what the store was already making, it still only accounted to about half of what Bricks and Minifigs told me that I could expect to be making in sales. So they was lying in number one. I doubled the sales and it still wasn't even half of what they advertised. Step 6 of the alleged fraudulent scheme. This is the prearranged successor. That would be Brandon Best, Jonathan. I don't know why I keep calling him Jonathan today. Joshua Johnson. It says the successor was in place before the defaults ripened. Baker Bricks LLC was organized in May 2024. This is more than 6 months before the seizure, the termination, the hostile takeover, whatever you want to call it, while Bricks and Minifigs was still accepting plaintiffs' restructured payments. So Bricks and Minifigs had entered into this deal with, this is a civil lawsuit. Bricks and Minifigs had, according to Crystal Law, again, I wasn't there, I don't know, but according to Crystal Law and Ben Gorman, Bricks and Minifigs had entered into a written agreement saying, look, you're not in default anymore. We're going to do a payment plan. We're going to restructure it. And Crystal had been making those new payments, the monthly payments. And Bricks and Minifigs was accepting those payments. They were taking that money each month from Crystal for that supposedly earlier breach. But then the breach, remember, had not actually been a breach anymore. It had been rescinded or withdrawn. So she said, yeah, they were taking them payments every month. Defendant Brandon Best, acting as Bricks and Minifigs' contracted inventory inspector, was given access to the store and conducted an inventory acquisition due diligence dressed as franchise compliance. Lawyers really should not be using AI to write their stuff. People are getting in a lot of trouble for this. Well, mostly for citations, but sometimes just too obvious. Salem Baker's assumed business name registration followed the day after the takeover, November 15th, 2024, and the business asset purchase agreement followed on March 27th. No honest termination process produces a successor whose paperwork precedes the default notice. See, this is why you don't use AI, because that sentence don't actually make any damn sense. You got to use a human brain to interpret some of this stuff. And this is not Crystal Law's fault, by the way. I know that she's not sitting here making these. She's not sitting here writing these. It would be a lawyer. But lawyers have been using AI since before it was even available to the public. No honest termination process produces a successor whose paperwork precedes a default notice. Put another way, in human instead of robot, how you going to say you're terminating somebody and already have the takeover entity set up? Now, what I will say, just to play devil's advocate, Brandon and Josh did not open up this actual successor business, which is the Salem Baker Bricks version, the Oregon operating entity, until the day after the termination. It takes like maybe 20 minutes to set up an LLC or a corporation or whatever. So, just to argue on the other side of things so that nobody is surprised when these arguments do end up getting made. They would say, well, we didn't prearrange the business. We already had a business. We just helped to rescue these stores. It does become a problem, for Bricks and Minifigs. And we're kind of we like having these for whatever. I absolutely agree with Crystal Law and Ben Gorman in this filing. I think there's something going on here, and I do think it's a scheme. I agree with their evidence I agree with the argument based on the evidence they're relying on being, look, this happened to other people in the same state. The same exact type of allegations have been made against them, Bricks and Minifigs. So I do believe, as long as I'm saying, I don't believe them. It's more than I'm saying to anticipate what may be argued on the other side. Yeah, I know, it's kinda disappointing, the AI stuff of it. I don't mind AI being used to help draft stuff, but, like, just put it in human language after, because like, we're getting really good at being able to tell when it's AI. Step 7 is the ambush, okay? November 14th, 2024, Bricks and Minifigs terminated and seized the store without prior notice and without a genuine opportunity to cure. This was a takeover that its director of operations, Kai McAllister, directed by telephone while conceding that the demand sounded like a threat. And he acknowledged them feeling that way because it is, or in a way, it is a threat. Briggs and Minifigs asserted debt was a moving target. Approximately 97,000 in the termination letter, about 100,000 on the recorded call the same day, and later exceeding 175,000. The arithmetic of pretext. Okay. So this is more AI writing right here. I'm just going to actually start censoring out the AI writing cuz it makes me feel sick. It makes me feel like I'm going to throw up or something. Okay, hold on. This is too obvious. Okay. So very good argument though. It's a moving target. How much did they owe? How much did the law Gormans owe? Was it $97,393.70? Was it, quote, about 100,000? Because girl, that's 2 point something thousand more. On the same day that they said about 100,000, they said, oh, actually it exceeds 175. Girl, that's a huge difference between 97 and 175. Now, some of y'all might say, well, Crystal Law Gorman also doesn't know how much stuff is worth because she also has a huge difference in her valuation. Her valuation, you might say, is valued between 70,000 to 120,000. That's a big difference too. True. But guess what Crystal Law Gorman don't have that Bam does have? Access to the actual records. She's saying all I could possibly do is go off what I kind of have here because Bricks and Minifigs is the sole party that can look into the records, the actual records themselves. I don't have those, so all I could do is guess. But BAM is not in that position because they have all the records. They have all the records. So I've been accused before of using AI because I use M dashes. I did major in English. I'm also a lawyer and I also did go to grad school for linguistics. So like I've been using these M dashes for a long time, like at least 15, 20 years. And I feel like, both sides of this, because on the one hand, it's like, I don't like AI writing, but on the other hand, AI writing is based on like excellent writers, which I am. So I've actually started not using grammatically correct M dashes. I've started using little dashes, so I'm not using those long ones just so people know, like, I put the dash in. I don't know if it actually helps anything, but my peace of mind. Thank you, Sonia, for the 1,000 jewels. I think that's a lot. Thanks so much to Susan for the 440 jewels. Yeah. Hipposquadamus, thank you for the 2. That's so funny. I love that Barbie meme react. Thank you for the $2 super chat. Indentured servitude. It kind of does feel like that. I'm not saying it is because I do think that's like a legal specific designation, but it kind of feels like that. It kind of feels like that, especially if they're financing the purchase of the store. Thank to Kel on Earth for being a member for 3 months. BAM isn't using straw man arguments for contract breach, but a gingerbread man. It's legally mine. Catch me if you can. Thank you, Marrakesh, for the 1,000 jewels. Cheers. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I've also started to leave some typos. Is this crazy? I've started to leave some typos and stuff. Like I used to be like mortified if I would look at and reread an email that I had already sent and it had typo in it. I would be like, fuck, I look so stupid. Now I'm like, yeah, at least they know it wasn't AI. I don't know, maybe that's crazy. Maybe I'm crazy girl. Okay, so we're still in the supposedly allegedly fraudulent scheme. We're on step 8, the harvest. Oh my God, this is such a sinister way to put it. The harvest. So Bricks and Minifigs kept everything. The $25,000 initial franchise fee economics built into the purchase. The purchase price of not less than $65,000 plus interest on the $45,000 note. Again, Bricks and Minifigs says that they do not offer financing. So how is there a $45,000 note? I believe there was, by the way. I think they lied. I believe Crystal and Ben. I don't believe Bam. Just so we are clear. I don't want that to be misconstrued. But I don't know. I wasn't there, so we'll have to see in court, of course. Plaintiff's inventory they kept, Bam kept, and equipment that was worth more than $100,000. Bam also kept consigned Lego merchandise worth, based on Crystal's own records, $50,000 to $80,000. And I think it's $50,000 to $100,000. And on the consignor's valuation, that's Brian Mansell's valuation, considerably more. Bricks and Minifigs kept customer layaway goods. They kept the going concern value of a store whose worth plaintiffs conservatively estimated was about $280,000 for the business. In Bam's own verified pleading in the Schneider action, Bricks and Minifigs admitted the taking while assigning all seized assets a paltry estimated value of about $38,000. This was a self-serving write-down that converted a six-figure seizure into a purported deficiency. Bricks and Minifigs then liquidated the damages under Section 15B while refusing to perform their obligation under 15E, which was an appraisal and fair market value purchase. Step 9, rinse and repeat. Bricks and Minifigs' own Item 20 disclosures confirm the cycle. Their Item 20 disclosures report a franchisor reacquisition of an Oregon outlet in fiscal year 2022, again in 2023, and again in 2025. 3 franchisor reacquisitions in 4 disclosed years in a state where Bricks and Minifigs reports only 5 to 7 outlets. Notably, Bricks and Minifigs' Item 20 disclosures for fiscal year 2024 report no Oregon termination and no Oregon reacquisition at all, even though that is actually the year that Bricks and Minifigs terminated Crystal Law's franchise and repossessed it. So she's like, this is actually so important. She's like, look, Bricks and Minifigs, even in their own admission, admits in Oregon there are 4 store turnovers in 5 years. But the underlying read between the lines here for me, in my opinion, is they don't even report all of the turnovers, because they reported those. You know what they didn't report in their franchise disclosure documents? They didn't report the 2024 takeover, which is the subject of this lawsuit. The Salem store itself, just that one single location out of 200 or 300, however many they have now, the one Salem store itself churned through 2 ownership turnovers in 19 months. Reacquisition is not an incident of Bricks and Minifigs' business. It's a line of business. Okay. Okay, so then they come up with a parallel. Now, is this going to be allowed to, remain in the lawsuit? Maybe so. Because usually or sometimes when you try to bring into a lawsuit some other parallel thing that has happened, you have to really just rely on public records or something like that. But attestations, Bricks and Minifigs might try to get this not included in the lawsuit, but I think it is relevant. The Canby, Oregon parallel. Bricks and Minifigs' own former corporate store, the same playbook, is the subject of pending litigation by another Oregon franchisee. Plastic Pallet LLC and Christina Marie Cooper versus BAM Franchising. The Canby store's provenance is disclosed in BAM's own 2026 FDD Item 1. Our former affiliate, Cerebral Plastics, an Oregon corporation, operated a Bricks and Minifigs in Canby from 2010 to 2017. Our former affiliate transferred the franchise to a franchisee in 2017. And that transferee was Cooper's Plastic Pallet LLC. Per the Cooper complaint, the sale was induced by the representation that the store had, same thing. The same type of thing. Remember step 1, the lure, where it said you were supposed to be, doing gross revenue of 189,000 to like 900 something thousand, but the average or whatever was about 508,000. Then Crystal was like, yeah, I mean, that's what they told me. It was about 508,000. So I took over the store. I doubled the sales and I still didn't even make it to half of what they said that I was supposed to be making gross. So this is not the first time someone's made that type of allegation and lawsuit against them. This lady, Christina Marie Cooper, said the same thing. She said, I was told that the store generated $200,000 in profits a year for the previous 3 years. So per year, $200,000 a year. But that wasn't apparently true. BAM's affiliate sold the store on a profits representation. Bricks and Minifigs then interfered with the lease and the landlord for the store. They attempted to force members of the LLC to surrender. This is the one too that BAM Bricks and Minifigs said that they terminated because they had the wrong sign. That was another reason why I was so gung ho. I was so bullish on the brick shell signage situation, because people have reported losing their franchise, losing their whole business because of some sign issue. Okay. This seems like what in real estate is known as equity stripping. Predators find those who have fallen behind on mortgage payments, but have significant equity in the home, but they aren't aware of it. Except some of them end up being aware of it, right? BAM's affiliate sold the store. Cerebral Plastics sold the store to this lady in Canby on a profits representation. So we get $200,000 in profits a year for the last 3 years. Bricks and Minifigs then interfered with the landlord and the lease. They attempted to force members of the LLC to surrender their rights, their ownership, for no consideration. They blocked her sale. They falsely accused her of breaches. And on October 30th, 2023, Bricks and Minifigs took possession of all the assets, then refused to provide any. You see how they always do this right before like the peak business time of the year too? When was Crystal's store taken over? November. When was this store taken over? October. When is the most profitable fiscal quarter of the year? Q4, or if it's based on a January 1st basis, but Christmas holiday shopping. This is the most profitable time of the year. So they take these people's stores right before, so-called Black Friday, which this would have been about a month before Black Friday. So, or even less. There's just a few weeks before the biggest sales day of the year. It's now we have a pattern of practice, like 2 of them. They also refused to provide any inventory. They refused to provide the valuation of what they took. Same exact way they did to Crystal. Christina Marie Cooper, this former plaintiff, pleads conversion of approximately $200,000 of assets. That's right in the wheelhouse of the number they like to steal. Seemingly, in my opinion, innocent till proven guilty. I don't know this to be a fact. Just looks like they're thieves to me. Now, this lady didn't stop there. However, she also pled conversion of the assets, financial abuse of a vulnerable person, and total damages of about $1.4 million. Crystal Law, on the other hand, has given testimony. Oh, this is news. Wow, cool. Crystal Law gave testimony in that Canby, Oregon dispute, based on photographs supplied by Cooper's counsel. Kaiser and Springfield. Okay, so these are the other Oregon locations. There's Eugene, there's Kaiser Salem, there's Springfield, and Canby. As alleged in paragraph 84, consignor Brian Mansell reported to Lego's chief executive a pattern up here in Oregon of seizing stores to steal assets, as well as a recent event involving over $200,000 of Lego being stolen and resold in Springfield. On information and belief, each incident followed the same sequence alleged here engineered or pretextual default, seizure without accounting, and recapture of assets at no cost to BAM. BAM's audited consolidated financial statements reflect a stockholders' deficit that has deepened in every disclosed year. 276,000 December 31st, 2023, 492,000 at 2024, 621 the next year with net losses of 94. As alleged in the system's economics dependent material on fees and assets The system's economics depended materially on fees and assets recaptured from existing franchisees. This means the business model of Bricks and Minifigs cannot survive without this recapturing and seizure. If they didn't recapture and seize some people's shit every year, the business would crumble. That's the allegation being made here. It's not like, oh, part of their business is sometimes oopsie daisy. They have to do a hostile takeover. No. They have to have a certain amount of these recaptures, or else the business is not going to keep making it. Now, is that true? I believe it is, but I don't know for certain because I'm not all in their books. Exiting. Well, I mean, exiting and existing, I might have read it wrong, but it's the same exact notion. That is, existing franchisees having their shit recaptured are obviously no longer going to be franchisees. But yeah, sure. Exiting is perhaps what it says, but it does not change the meaning at all whatsoever. Existing franchisees are the ones they have right now, right? So they have to basically fish in their own barrel. Out of their existing franchisees, every year, a couple of them have to get their shit took back over, no matter if they breached or not. That is for the business to survive. That isn't even including how the business also completely relies and depends on new franchisees coming in to get those franchise fees, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A franchisor losing money on operations, but harvesting six-figure asset packages from forced exits, all while booking them at these very low, pitiful rates. Really, it was like about $200,000 worth of inventory inside that store, but they said it was 30 or whatever. Has found its profit center in its own franchisees' failures, or not even failures. Because this would say that Crystal Law or Christina Cooper did something that was a failure. The failure here was entirely on Bricks and Minifigs. This is the fraud scheme's reason for being. The timeline itself pleads intent, concealment. They concealed all this stuff. Continuing concealment. The pattern alleged, Utah. Okay, so the pattern alleged in this subsection violates, insiders, this part. Insiders on both sides of the counter. Bricks and Minifigs' own disclosures state that its CEO, Ammon, and COO, Matt, have been co-owners of Craigle LLC. This is the Bricks and Minifigs in Orem since June 2017. They say Bricks and Minifigs' sole disclosed affiliate, Bricks by the Box, formed in June 2023, and this operates a Lego-themed subscription reseller. Bricks and Minifigs' principals thus operate as franchisees themselves within their own system, and they compete in the same resale market as their franchisees. This gives them direct personal economic interests in the disposition. So basically, they are the competition of their own franchisees because they have a franchise themselves. So since they are the competitors, they have a financial interest in eliminating their competition, which is their own franchisees. The pattern alleged in this section violates the Utah Pattern of Unlawful Activity Act. Let me just see what that is. It means engaging in conduct that constitutes the commission of at least 3 episodes of unlawful activity. Yeah, this must be the Utah RICO The state level version of the RICO. That's this right here. This is one of the new things that was added to this lawsuit was a cause of action that alleges the violation of this act. It's so cute that they wanted to sue Brian Mansell and Ben for RICO, and now they got sued for RICO, including Joshua Johnson. Good luck with that, bitch. Huh. Okay, BAM's June 4th, 2026 press release confirms the scheme is ongoing. This press release, issued while this action was pending, opens by describing Bricks and Minifigs as an authorized Lego reseller. That is the same affiliation representation that Lego disavowed in writing in February 2025. And that Bricks and Minifigs' own FDD disclaims Bricks and Minifigs is still leading with the lie that induced Crystal's purchase. The same press release renewed and escalated Bricks and Minifigs' false statements about Crystal, this time over the names and titles of two of BAM's most senior officers. It asserts that there were 3 sets of books being managed by the previous owner, Miss Law Gorman, that Crystal Law kept a hidden personal bookkeeping version of the consignment records, that Bricks and Minifigs' point of sale data shows more than $52,000 and potentially more was sold from the collection. On information to believe, the June 4th release, which simultaneously blamed Bricks and Minifigs' own handpicked successor operators for gross negligence. So yeah, it's like Bricks and Minifigs literally handpicked Josh Johnson and Brandon Best. Handpicked. But then they throw them under the bus too. Gross negligence and operational gaps. This was calculated to shift responsibility, shift accountability, shift the blame for the consignment collection, Brian Mansell's, onto Crystal, to poison the public record while this lawsuit is going on and while that Cooper lawsuit is going on, to drive a wedge between Crystal and her husband and Brian Mansell. It is the final step of the playbook. Harvest the store. Discard successors and rewrite history. Defendant Bricks and Minifigs has engineered a scheme to take back a profitable franchise without paying for it. Their fundamental failures in transferring bank accounts and leases were not mere negligence. They were mechanisms by which Bricks and Minifigs manufactured defaults that it could later cite as grounds for termination. Bricks and Minifigs retained control of the financial infrastructure of plaintiff's business, ensured the payment failures would occur, concealed the problems from plaintiffs, and then weaponized those failures to justify an immediate takeover. This is a pattern. Create the breach, conceal the breach, terminate for the breach. This is a hallmark of a franchisor acting in calculated bad faith. When plaintiffs made a preliminary inquiry about a possible sale, just ask the simple question. Bricks and Minifigs seized the opportunity to swoop in and oust plaintiffs under false pretenses. Bricks and Minifigs' own correspondence shows it never intended to pay anything for the business it seized. Instead, they just demanded that plaintiffs pay BAM or walk away with nothing. In executing this plan, Bricks and Minifigs breached numerous provisions of the franchise agreement, violated basic duties of fair dealing, committed clear-cut torts, conversion of personal property, and defamation. The evidence shows Bricks and Minifigs acted willfully, with malice and oppressive bad faith. Such conduct justifies an award of punitive damages. They get into the damages. And then they say claims for relief. First cause of action, fraud in the inducement. Concealment in the recapture practice. Bricks and Minifigs concealed that it routinely withheld from franchisees the operational assets its purchase documents conveyed. That a material share of system exits were franchisor forced and resulted in Bricks and Minifigs recapturing outlets and assets. Bricks and Minifigs also concealed that BAM arranged successor operators for locations, while incumbent franchisees remained in good faith workouts, material omissions that rendered its affirmative representations misleading. So this is fraud that they're alleging here. Like, that's pretty serious. I think it might be more than collective misdemeanor. Again, this is civil. This is not criminal case. Each of the foregoing representations was false. Kai McAllister acknowledged on tape that Bricks and Minifigs take it or leave it demand sounds like a threat because in a way it is. It was false, inducement. So they're going through the elements. Matt McNeff personally made representations that Bricks and Minifigs enjoyed an authorized relationship with the Lego group. Okay. And Matt knew he was lying. That's the allegation here. Defendant Matthew McNeff personally made the representation that Briggs and Minifigs enjoyed an authorized relationship with the Lego group, knowing it to be false. As the officer who personally made that misrepresentation, Matthew McNeff is individually liable for his own fraud, irrespective of his role as an agent of BAM. So Crystal's lawyers are already anticipating Matt McNeff being like, you can't pierce the corporate veil. You can't sue me. You have to sue BAM only. They're like, no, we could sue your ass because you're the one who lied and said y'all have some authorized relationship with Lego when you didn't. The lawsuit goes on to say, on information and belief at the time, Bricks and Minifigs and Matthew McNeff induced Crystal to make this investment in this business. They did not, BAM parties did not intend that Crystal would enjoy the long-term benefits of the franchise. The system's economics, as reflected in BAM's own disclosures, and in the pre-arranged replacement structure described above, the economics of Bricks and Minifigs depended materially on fees and assets that were recaptured from exiting franchisees. And this would be the ones that were already in existence, like the ones that they already had that had to be leaving or forced out. This recapture and resale cycle described in paragraph 105 through 109 was a profit center. Okay. The recapturing of the assets is a profit center. Bricks and Minifigs seized assets at self-assessed paltry values and refranchised or sold the locations, monetizing the franchisees' forced exits. Ooh. They should have just gave Brian his Legos back. Second cause of action, negligent misrepresentation. Third cause of action, breach of contract. Fourth cause of action, breach of the implied covenant of good faith and fair dealing. Pressing a non-negotiable demand that BAM's own director of operation conceded. It sounds like a threat. BAM's bad faith conduct further includes engineering the conditions of the purported default by withholding the bank account, the lease assignment, operational systems, agreements promised, and invoking the resulting defaults for grounds of termination. Fifth cause of action is conversion. That's like stealing. Defendant Baker Bricks, Brandon Best, and Joshua Johnson also exercised wrongful dominion and control over Crystal Law's property and third parties. That would be Brian Mansell. From the night of the seizure forward, Brandon Best secured the store and inventoried its contents. Baker Bricks, Brandon Best, Joshua Johnson thereafter took possession of, operated upon, and sold that property, including the consigned and layaway goods, with knowledge or conscious disregard of plaintiffs and Brian Mansell's superior right to the inventory. Having been told the consignor's claim within days of the seizure, that's Brian Mansell's, they're liable as direct converters, not just downstream purchasers. Now, this downstream purchaser thing is what Brandon Best and Joshua Johnson are going to be relying on. They're going to be saying, look, this is like if somebody, stole a diamond ring. Okay. I didn't steal the diamond ring. I went to Facebook Marketplace and I just bought the diamond ring on Facebook Marketplace. I didn't know. You can't hold me responsible. I didn't steal that ring. That's someone else. You got to go after the person who stole your ring. Not mine. I mean, it wasn't me stealing. Now imagine there's another whole step there. Imagine there's another step included in the middle. Someone steals a ring, then someone sells it to a pawn shop, then the pawn shop sells it. Maybe I shouldn't say pawn shop. They have rules. Let me do something else. Someone steals a ring, sells it on Facebook Marketplace, and then the person who bought it on Facebook Marketplace then wants to go sell it on Etsy. At some point, it starts to get very difficult to track who's the diamond, where'd it come from, especially if it's not marked in any way. Like a Lego doesn't have a serial number, for example. I mean, they do have these like case numbers, but it's like every Cloud City will have the same number on it. It's like specific serial numbers. So here, I believe Brandon Best and Joshua Johnson are going to say that they are downstream purchasers. That's what they always say, right? They don't say specifically downstream purchasers. What they specifically say is usually something like, we weren't in a deal with him, or he has to go after Crystal. He has to go after the previous franchise owner because she abandoned the store, whatever. There's many reasons why that's dumb and wrong, but one of the reasons they rely on this is they trying to act like they can depend and rely on this downstream purchaser thing. Jocko, thanks so much for the $9.99. These corporate BAM jerks belong in jail, innocent until proven guilty. If I threaten people like Kai, strong-armed people like Brandon and Josh, or conned, cheated, stolen, lied, allegedly, innocent until proven guilty, I'd be in jail. But I'm not rich. I think it's somewhat has to do with being rich. I think it also somewhat has to do with having bold-faced, unmitigated gall and audacity to be lying all the damn time. But that's just my opinion. Thank you for the $9.99. Thank you, M. Marie, for the $4.99. BAM is scam. Well, I'm not saying that. I'm reading a comment. You know, a lot of people out here trying to sue YouTubers for saying something is a scam. I'm not saying anything's a scam. I'm reading the lawsuit, but people in the chat are saying it's a scam. I don't know. You know, innocent until proven guilty. Thank you for the $4.99. Somebody said Crystal Law is in the chat. Shout out to her. Shout out to her. The value of all the property seized exceeds $100,000 for inventory and equipment alone. The consigned collection was at least worth $50,000. Could be up to 80, could be even more. It was converted from Crystal and Ben's possession. She seeks restitution, consequential damages, prejudgment interest, and punitive damages. Now, sixth cause of action is aiding and abetting conversion. That's kind of like a business form of that. Like, conversion is when you take something, convert it into something else or into another ownership. So it's like you might, take something that's on your assets list and put it on the liability, or something on the liability and put it in assets. It's like a way of taking possession and ownership over something. But it's basically, in the layman term, stealing. Business version of stealing. Plaintiffs incorporate all preceding paragraphs. Also, conversion, I also think it has a lot to do with hiding it and not giving it back. Let me just read on. Intentionally interferes with another person's property in a way that completely deprives the owner of its use or possession. Yeah, it's a civil equivalent of theft. It deprives the owner from being able to use it, even though it's theirs. Blandine Broomfield said, so BAM franchising has a business of taking hopeful people's life savings. They mortgage their homes, get helped to fail, and lose the huge initial fee. That seems to be kind of like what's being alleged. I mean, I don't know. I wasn't there, but the allegations are starting to rack up. I'll say that. Plaintiffs incorporate all preceding paragraphs. This is asserted against defendants Baker Bricks, Brandon Best, and Joshua Johnson. As alleged above, Bricks and Minifigs converted personal property and the third-party consigned and layaway goods in the lawful possession of Crystal and Ben Gorman by seizing them without authority, valuation, or accounting. Defendants Brandon Best, Joshua Johnson, and their business, Baker Bricks, knew of Bricks and Minifigs conversion and provided knowing and substantial assistance to it. Brandon Best secured plaintiff's store, kicked Crystal out, said he would call the cops, and inventoried the contents for Bricks and Minifigs all on the very night of the seizure. Brandon Best, Joshua Johnson, and their business, Baker Bricks, then took possession of the seized property, operated the store using it, and sold it, including property they had been told belonged to a third-party consignor. Now, who is a bona fide downstream purchaser? If somebody walks into that Bricks and Minifigs, it's closed now. So let's say that was when it was still open and Amanda Baker was in there. Let's say somebody walked into the store, picked up a Lego set, walked to the counter and bought it. Just so happened that customer had no idea. But just so happened that was Brian Mansell's set. Let's say it was the Ewok Village. They purchased the village, they take it home, they put it together, they put it on the shelf or whatever. That is a downstream purchaser. because they just are a customer in a store. They walked in a store. They had no reason to believe that was stolen. It's a store, so they're buying it. That is a downstream purchase. Now, what Brandon Best and Joshua Johnson are going to probably try to act like is that that's them. They were just these unwitting, unbeknownst to, they didn't know. They just bought the store. They didn't know. But I think Crystal Law's lawyer and Ben Gorman's lawyers have done an excellent job of showing, no, that downstream purchase. They knew about this. They were corporate workers. Now, is Brandon Best the only one where they show in this new amended version that he was a corporate guy? Because Josh Johnson also is listed as a franchise seller. So he's like a corporate guy too. Maybe I missed that. Brandon Best secured the store, inventoried the contents on the night of the seizure. Brandon Best, Joshua Johnson, Baker Bricks then took possession of the property, operated the store, and sold it, including property they had been told belonged to a third-party consignor. Not only had they been told, it was on video. By securing and inventorying and accepting and operating upon and monetizing this stolen property with knowledge of Bricks and Minifigs' theft, I'm saying stolen and theft just because it's easier than saying conversion for understanding, but it does say conversion. So just so y'all are aware, when I say theft in this paragraph, they are saying conversion, but it just reads easier if you think of it as, if you hear it as theft. So by securing, inventorying, accepting, operating upon, and monetizing the stolen property, stolen, with knowledge of Bricks and Minifigs corporate stealing this property from Crystal and by default or by virtue of that from Brian, these defendants, that's Bricks and Minifigs, Brandon Best, Joshua Johnson, substantially assisted and encouraged the conversion or the theft and are jointly and severally liable. So they getting the corporate veil pierced too. Nobody's going to be talking about a fictitious business name now, are they? It's your name on there now. So Lemon Pound Cake said, wait, if the whole FDD is built on a fraud, that changes everything, wouldn't it? If. That's a big if. We don't know. We weren't there, but it ain't looking good for Bricks and Minifigs. I'll say that. Plaintiffs seek restitution. Seventh cause of action is the Utah Uniform Commercial Code, surplus damages, and elimination of deficiency. The closing of the franchise purchase. Plaintiffs granted BAM a security interest in the Salem store, inventory, equipment, accounts, and other personal property under a written security agreement. Bricks and Minifigs has admitted that it held that security interest in all accounts, chattel paper, general intangibles, blah, blah, blah. Upon the payment default, this default that BAM claimed, the one about the untimely payment or whatever, BAM's rights and remedies in that collateral were governed exclusively by Article 9 of the Utah Commercial Code. Before disposing of that collateral, Bricks and Minifigs had a requirement. They were required, two requirements: dispose of the goods in a commercially reasonable manner and send Crystal Law and Ben Gorman a reasonable authenticated notification of the disposition. So maybe they sold it. Maybe if they would have sold it to M&R Productions, for example, and then send an authorized notification to Crystal Law. Hey, we sold your shit to M&R. Here's the money we paid for it. That is a requirement under the law, not under the franchise agreement. Like there's no getting out of that. Bricks and Minifigs didn't do any of that stuff they were required to do, though. They admitted they exercised its priority rights to the collateral in the security agreement. They admitted that they repossessed the store. They admitted that they took away fixtures, inventory, and other assets. They admitted that they unilaterally credited themselves an estimate of $38,000, a paltry value thereof. They conducted no public or private sale. They gave plaintiffs no notice of any disposition, and they provided no accounting of the collateral or its value. BAM then transferred the seized collateral to its installed replacement operator. That'd be Brandon Best and Joshua Johnson, rather than disposing of it on the open market. They didn't just put it up for sale. They transferred it to corporate. That's a problem here, because the law says they had to have an open, fair, reasonable sale. They just gave it to their insider, or maybe sold it to their insider. By a business and asset purchase agreement dated March 17th, 2025, Bricks and Minifigs transferred the store and its assets to Baker Bricks. This was the replacement entity formed by Brandon Best and Josh Johnson, whose principal, Brandon Best, had served as Bricks and Minifigs' own inventory inspector at the seizure. To the extent the transferee is the secured party or a person related to it, the surplus or deficiency must be calculated, as if the disposition had been made to an unrelated person at a commercially reasonable price. In all events, a transfer of the collateral to Bricks and Minifigs' own replacement operator at a value Bricks and Minifigs assigned to itself was not commercially reasonable. Plaintiffs gave no waiver of these protections, so Crystal and Ben are like, we didn't waive our rights under the law. They just broke it. Because Bricks and Minifigs did not dispose of the collateral lawfully, according to these allegations, Bricks and Minifigs bears the burden of proof. They have to prove that their enforcement and disposition were commercially reasonable. Again, this is a legal requirement. It's not even like, oh, he agreed to do that in the franchise. No, it's required under the law. Unless Bricks and Minifigs meets their burden, the proceeds of the disposition are presumed equal to the secured obligation expenses and attorney's fees. Hoo-hoo! Uh-oh. So put another way, if Bricks and Minifigs don't cure this problem, they're going to also now be responsible for Crystal's attorney's fees. Oh. Bricks and Minifigs did not dispose of the collateral in compliance with the law. So the law, because they didn't follow this, they had a burden of proving that they acted reasonably, that they disposed of these assets in a reasonable manner. Unless they come up with some proof that what they did was reasonable, the proceeds of their taking and selling all this shit is going to be presumed equal to the secured obligation, the expenses, and attorney's fees. This would eliminate any deficiency that Bricks and Minifigs claims against Crystal, including the approximately $175,000 that now at this point Bricks and Minifigs is trying to pretend like Crystal and Ben owe. Again, this number's all over the place. They say 100, they say 97, they say 175. They just be throwing numbers around. As a direct and proximate result of Bricks and Minifigs breaking the Uniform Commercial Code, they broke the law, according to this allegation here. And as a result, Crystal and her husband obviously have been damaged. They're entitled to recover the surplus of what they would have received had the collateral been disposed of in a commercially reasonable manner. They are entitled to the amount by which the commercially reasonable value of their seized inventory, equipment, and other property would have been, together with damages for Bricks and Minifigs' failure to follow the law, which would be Utah Code, annotated 70A-9A-6252. They're also entitled to the elimination of Bricks and Minifigs' claimed deficiency. They seek surplus damages, statutory damages. They seek a determination by the court that BAM's claim deficiency is eliminated. So basically, Crystal and Ben want the judge to say they don't owe anything to BAM. They don't owe anything. 8th cause of action, tortious interference. 9th cause of action, defamation. They lying, and they saying Crystal and Ben are saying they still lying. BAM is still lying about her. BAM's defamatory campaign did not stop when this action was filed. On June 4th, 2 months ago, Bricks and Minifigs published a nationwide press release through a commercial news wire, stating, among other things, that there were 3 sets of books being managed by the previous owner. They said that Crystal kept a hidden personal bookkeeping version of the consignment records. They said in that press release that Bricks and Minifigs' point of sale data shows more than $52,000, and potentially more was sold from the collection during Crystal's tenure, which is significantly more than was reported by her. They said that Brian would be compensated for anything unaccounted for, including what Crystal failed to compensate. In a statement made by defendant Ammon over his own name and title, they stated in their press release that Crystal Law entered directly into an unauthorized consignment agreement with Brian. They stated that Crystal owed close to $200,000 at the time of planned abandonment from the store. This is all just 2 months ago. So she's saying, look, they've been defaming me this whole time and they still haven't stopped. This cause of action is asserted against Bricks and Minifigs and Ammon and Matt. Injurious falsehood, civil conspiracy, on information and belief, Bricks and Minifigs and successor operators Brandon Best, Josh Johnson, and their business coordinated prior to November 14th. So they were in cahoots already, as according to these allegations, to arrange the immediate transfer of the store. The existence of this pre-existing arrangement is evidenced by the advance formation of Baker Bricks in May. It's evidenced by Brandon Best securing and inventorying of a store on the night that the seizure happened. And the fact that Brandon Best was kind of acting as an agent for Bricks and Minifigs. 12th cause of action is unlawful trade practices. 13th cause of action. Now, here's like the RICO. Okay, here's the state RICO right here. Defendant. Oh, man, this is crazy. I'm going to have to clip this part out and like just make a video. Like the BAM RICO enters the chat in public filings, girl. Defendant Bricks and Minifigs, or BAM Franchising Inc., more specifically, is an enterprise within the meaning of the statute. In addition, or in the alternative, defendant Bricks and Minifigs, Baker Bricks, Salem Baker Bricks, Ammon McNeff, Matthew McNeff, Brandon Best, and Joshua Johnson are a group of individuals and entities associated in fact. The recapture and resale operation is described below and above, and they therefore are still an enterprise. Defendants engaged in a pattern of unlawful activity. So we're going through the elements that need to be proven for RICO. So first, you need an enterprise. Then you need more than one crime. It has to be a pattern. Federal RICO requires 2 prerequisite acts. Utah requires 3. So it is a little more stringent. At least 3 episodes of unlawful activity that are not isolated. They have to share in the same or similar purpose. And the purpose here is recapturing franchise outlets and their assets without payment. It has to have this similar results in mind, which is the franchisee is stripped of its investment in property while the franchisor retains and resells both and benefits. You have to have victims. The victims are first-time franchise owners who invested personal savings and methods of commission. Now, something that I've thought about too, which I know like Ben and them like to try, technically legal things that maybe a lot of lawyers are hesitant to try, but in case the lawyers are ever listening to this, maybe y'all could point them to this part. There is currently a RICO. Currently. Now, this thing goes back like 10 or 11 years. Back in 2015 or so, maybe 16. Legally Mine was sued, but it was sued under a different name that it goes by, a DBA called Vail Corporate. It was sued. And this case has gone back and forth, up to the appeal court, down back, up to the mediation, over back. One of the things they're suing for is RICO. And it's kind of like a class action. There's a bunch of defendants. And they're saying that this was like a scheme. Now, Legally Mine, doing business as Vail Corporate, and the rest of the many defendants, this is the one with the alleged real estate scheme at the real estate summits. That class of defendants, I don't know if it's a class action officially or if it's just a big old lawsuit. I think it might be class action, but one of the causes of action is RICO. And the question up for debate right now, as the last I looked, at least in the last couple months, is whether RICO claims, in particular class action RICO claims, can be constitutionally subject to arbitration. The argument, and hasn't been decided yet by the defendants, is you can't force arbitration for RICO because that's so unjust and unconscionable and unfair. It forces all of us similarly situated plaintiffs to independently, individually finance and go through with arbitration when this should all just be in court. So I don't know how that's going to end up working out, but I can imagine a world where eventually there's actually maybe a class action against Bricks and Minifigs, BAM franchising for this pattern. At least 3 episodes of unlawful activity that are not isolated. They share the same purpose, the same results, the same victims, and the same methods of commission. And so their methods of commission that they're alleging here, Crystal Law and Ben Gorman, are that the methods are inducing the purchase through lying, withholding operational assets, not transferring the leases, not transferring the bank accounts. They manufacture defaults. They basically engineer and create default by virtue of not turning over operational assets. Then they terminate by ambush. They seize without notice. They don't give evaluation. They don't give any accounting, and then they resell. Salem plaintiffs 2022 to 2025, Bricks and Minifigs, Matthew McNeff, induce a purchase. Then there's the Canby. Then there's Kaiser. Then there's each defendant's role is alleged with particularity. Plaintiffs were injured in their business and property. They're entitled to recover fees and damages. 14th cause is unjust enrichment. Defendant Baker Bricks LLC has been unjustly enriched as well at Crystal and Ben's expense. Baker Bricks received and profited from Crystal and Ben's business, their goodwill, their inventory, and their store location, including consigned and layaway goods without payment to plaintiffs. Equity would require Baker Bricks disgorge the benefits it received and retained at plaintiff's expense. Plaintiffs seek restitution in the amount of benefits conferred or the value of the property and the business seized. 15th cause of action, they want a declaratory judgment. Actual controversy exists. Plaintiffs seek a judicial declaration resolving the Plaintiffs seek judicial declaration resolving the following disputed issues. Number 1, Bricks and Minifigs' termination of the franchise agreement was wrongful. Number 2, the promissory note has been satisfied, discharged, or is otherwise unenforceable. Number 3, plaintiffs have no continuing post-termination obligations. Number 4, this is what they want the court to declare by declaratory judgment. The plaintiffs have no continuing post-termination obligations. The arbitration clause does not apply. Plaintiffs didn't steal, misappropriate, or wrongfully remove any inventory. This is important. When there is defamation, the courts can't make somebody say something, right? So for defamation, if somebody comes out and says, John Doe, I know John Doe from middle school, and he got arrested and convicted of R word. Meanwhile, that's not true, and you know it's not true, right? Like, that would be defamation. Well, John Doe might sue somebody who said that. He might even win. But what John Doe can never, ever get is a court to force the plaintiff in the case, force the defendant in the case to take back his words. Can't force it. What a judge can do, though, is after this went to trial, a jury determined allegations that so-and-so did this and that, wasn't true, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, that would be into the declaratory judgment. So it's kind of like, I see why they're doing this asking for this, because is Ammon McNeff ever going to come out and say Crystal Law did not steal anything? Probably not. He's going to, at the very least, say, well, I thought she did at the time. Right? So Crystal's like, fuck him. Can we just get the court to acknowledge this? We didn't steal or remove inventory wrongfully, et cetera, et cetera. They want a declaratory judgment that Bricks and Minifigs is obligated to provide plaintiffs with a complete accounting of all assets seized from the Salem store. Operation of Utah Code, BAM's claim deficiency is eliminated, and plaintiffs owe BAM nothing. And then they pray for relief, statutory damages, injunctive and declaratory. They got the exhibit list here. Ooh, look at all that. Oh my God, all that was added. Wow. So that is the large part. That's pretty much all of the new first amended complaint that now alleges a freaking RICO. I mean, this the Utah State version. Shout out to Chris Gorman in the chat. Thank you so much. All of the support means everything to me. Thank y'all so much for watching this video. I am going to have to run. I'm going to be back live in about 15 or 20 minutes to start my coverage of the Tupac Shakur murder trial. So I'm going to start a new live for that one. That's all I really had for this one. In the meantime, facts ain't defamation. Neither are opinions. Please don't contact anybody mentioned in today's video. Please don't try to contact them or anything. That's not the point of that's not the point of this video. This video is meant to report on matters of public concern, including this. So yeah, I'll be back live in just a few minutes. Love you, meet. Okay, bye.